Hey, it's JP. Thanks for listening to The Get Up. This episode's guest and I are both big advocates for taking care of your mental health, but are by no means experts. We're just giving our opinions based on our experiences. If you feel the need to speak to someone about your own mental health, please contact a professional. If you are in the United States and feel suicidal, please dial 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. To my listeners in other countries, please use your local support organizations. With that said, enjoy the show. Warning, what you're about to hear was intended to make you laugh a lot. If you listen to the show and feel inspired, then that's awesome. But if you're easily offended or just can't take a joke, you should turn this off right now. Otherwise, turn this shit up and hang on. Welcome to The Get Up. Welcome to another episode of The Get Up. I'm your host, JP. Today I'm joined by repeat guest, Justin Davenport. Justin, how you doing?
I am doing just A-okay. Just A-okay.
Just A-okay today?
A-okay.
I mean, you did just have a long-ass drive out here.
It was a bit of a hike. I got slightly ever so lost.
You got lost, too. So for those that don't know, I relocated to the woods. So I'm definitely an outdoorsman, and now I live quite a bit away from civilization. And so for people to come join me on the show, they have to drive quite a ways. And so I appreciate it.
Hour 10 minutes per the map.
I appreciate it.
Hour and 25 per the moronic driver.
The moronic driver.
Yeah.
It's like that episode of The Office where he drives into the lake because it told him to turn right, and he just like, it told me to do it.
You have no idea how bad things were before the invention of GPS.
I do, because I was a delivery driver. Like, we used to roll with the, like, I don't want to call it like an atlas, but it was, we just referred to it as the map book, but it was the Tri-County Detroit area, like Michigan, Tri-County Michigan area.
The Rand McNally.
In a gigantic spiral-bound map book. And, like, you'd look up the road in the glossary, and it'd tell you which page in which sector, A1 or whatever, and then you'd have to go find the road, and we did all of our navigating like that.
Do you remember planning your vacation with MapQuest?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Printing up 4
That's
or
not
5
even
sheets?
a thing. I mean, you can still go to MapQuest. I mean,
Yeah.
MapQuest is still around, but it's like, why do you need to? It was crazy. And then TomTom, when TomToms came out, and there was the Garmin units too, those like were game changers for us because we could plot our whole route and just go to the next destination. So I would seriously at night, I would plug all of our route stops in order into my TomTom. So the next day it was literally just plug it in, set it, let's go to the first one, go to the next one, go to the, like that part was awesome. Except for when TomTom was wrong. That was we got into some interesting situations.
Often happened in the early.
Oh yeah.
Because there was, you had to update on the regular.
Yeah, yep, you had to update the maps. But yeah, MapQuest was just written, you'd print them out.
Yeah, just go right through it. And I had an entire file in my back seat when I had one job where I had to do like the whole southeast of the state. And so where each location was,
right,
I had maps from my house to each location in a folder in the back.
In a folder?
In a folder.
Yeah, I never had the folder. But I remember driving like Chicago and some other places like with a small little pamphlet of papers that told me where I was supposed to be going. And then
be amazed at my being in the back seat when your dad is driving and he just gets in the car.
He knew where to go?
Just out of memory.
I mean, but you're there now, right? No?
I can't remember where I'm going.
I can. Now I just don't remember the names of roads. Like in my last subdivision, I knew how to navigate it. I didn't know what any of the streets were called, but I could tell you all the streets of the subdivision I grew up in.
My location is so poor. I remember I left Lansing one time to go to Battle Creek. And the reason I knew that I was off course is I saw a sign on the side of the road that said, "The people of Indiana welcome you."
I hated driving into Indiana. But yeah, I
missed Battle Creek by that much.
That's a long miss. I broke down in Battle Creek once. Yeah, that was a tough time.
I'm clueless when it comes to that. I am no Christopher Columbus. Not that he really knew where he was going.
He got he got lost too.
I guess we're the same. Because I just like, wherever you end up, you're just like, hey, this is where I was aiming for.
Right, exactly.
I was going for this anyway.
Oh, we must be in India.
Yep. Like, this is just fine. I'm cool with that. I love it when people give me directions and they're like, go east and then, go west at this point. And I'm like, who the fuck am I, Magellan? I don't know where that is.
Well, so it is funny that you say that, because like for me, I know those cardinal directions, but if I talk to Megan and I tell her like, yeah, it's on the north side of this road, she'll be like, what side? What are you talking about?
Like, tell me.
I'm like, yeah, head south and then you're gonna turn east, and she's like, what? Yeah.
And it reminds me of those grandfather like Buick Regals with the compass
built into the dash.
Built in the dash, the bubble compass.
Or you get the people that had those ones installed.
Yeah.
The big bubble.
Just a giant, like, sextant in the front.
Sextant in the fucking dash.
Like I'm going by the North Star now.
Oh, yeah.
That was a very, like, World War II aging grandfather thing
for sure. And then the TomToms and stuff came out, and then it turned into having navigation built into your car. And I don't know if you've experienced this, but I have with Dodge products that like one of my first cars trucks had the navigation built into it, and then it turned into, well, it just has Apple CarPlay or whatever it's called, or Android Auto, and you use your phone for the navigation. So it's not even built in anymore. Megan just got a new car. Hers is a GM. She's got Equinox, whatever it's called. She's got one of those. It has GPS built into it, but it only lasted for the first month. Then you have to pay if you want to use it, or you can use your phone. So now we just use our phones.
I think the phone is more updated. You don't have to worry about it.
It makes sense, right, from the standpoint of like having built-in technology, or this technology that you always have with you anyway, or most people do, just plug it in, boom.
Many years ago, I had a friend who worked for TomTom, and they did massive layoffs because most of the companies had stopped using that, because they were working with the automotive companies, and I can't remember really 100% off the top of my head, but I think it was Volvo had TomTom products.
So that was TomTom. That was part of their plan. I remember when they stopped making their units, the actual like portable units, because they were focusing on the auto market and just having built-in technology instead of the consumer get your little portable one.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's kind of moved on.
Yeah, for sure, because now it's just built into all the new cars. Eventually, all the new cars will drive us around, and then we can be even lazier than before.
I used to grow up thinking that I was growing up in the most boring of times, and I looked at my grandfather, and I was like, hey, my grandfather, great grandparents, however old your grandparents were at the time, you think back and you're just like, oh, they went from horse and buggy. From a lot of people to
a car,
to radio, tube radio, to television, to landing on the moon within, a fairly small
amount of time.
Amount of time.
If you think
45 years.
If you think about it in the general time of humans, we did a lot in a really small period of time.
But the Gen X people, now that I think of myself, like in that group, being born in the 70s, I kind of feel like I've seen some pretty dramatic changes.
Oh, sure.
And I feel comparable almost.
Yeah.
In a way, where it's like, hey, I remember, rotary telephone.
Yep.
That you could not own. That you rented from you rented it from the thing.
I mean, you remember your phone plans. Remember, it was like free nights and weekends? And hey, let me call you back after 7.
Yep.
And so that way I didn't get charged for it, or I'll call you on the weekends.
I call my grandparents on Sundays or Saturday.
Yeah, or call and collect and all that stuff. Like,
all gone.
Yeah, and just having that central phone. Like, it was just, I remember when we got a cordless phone. I remember my dad being in the basement, and he would turn on, like, he would talk through the phone, and it would come through the base station, and it had to be in my sister's room because that's where the phone cord, for some weird reason, came into our house. And
Everybody
it was just
had
like,
that 40-foot phone cord, so you could walk around the house.
And it just always got tangled. Yeah. I mean, like, it's just crazy, and now we just all have cell phones. It went to cordless phones, and then it turned into cell phones.
Those cordless phones were amazing because you'd drive, I remember in high school, you'd drive around, you could pick up people's conversations on
did that.
On your car radio.
I never did that.
If you could clink, it was just pure happenstance, like, oh, I can hear what the neighbors are talking about.
Oh, talk about voyeurism in a weird way, right?
Well, think of party lines that our parents.
Oh yeah, remember those party lines?
You just pick up, listen to see if somebody was talking, and then
what happened
if
with
they're not, now I can use it.
Like, and on that vein, right? You had those party lines that you could call in and talk to people all on the same line, but then that got kind of replaced with chat rooms. I mean, remember when chat rooms were a huge thing? Like, Yahoo had chat rooms. There was AOL Instant Messenger chat rooms.
ASL or whatever. Everybody always put that on there. Like,
age, sex, location. Yeah. Age, sex, location. ASL.
What was the L? I couldn't remember off the top of my head. But,
oh, yeah.
That was always, the first question of a pedophile. Hey, who have I got right here?
Right. Oh, man, I spent a lot of time in chat rooms. That's pretty funny. And then it was just like, I don't know, it's weird, the evolution of that stuff. And now it's just social media. Like, that evolved to social media, where everything's just a gigantic, everyone's included chat room. Before you could have, like, little private chat rooms, and you can still do private stuff, right? Like, I'm on a private Instagram distro thing where we just share goofy shit, but with work people. But it's like, yeah, that, like, kind of replaced it. Social media just became the all-inclusive chat room for all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
But we have seen a lot change. I mean, if you think, like you were talking about the rotary phones and even computers.
I feel bad for my son.
Yeah.
Like, quite honestly.
What, never knowing experiencing what came before?
I think never knowing the freedom that we had because of the way that privacy is no longer there. That you can make a mistake, that you could screw up.
Your data, everything wasn't being tracked and sold? To
a limit. Nowadays, in a bit of a cancellation culture, you can go back and try to blame somebody for something that happened in 1984. If there's
a record.
As long as they're famous enough.
Yeah,
well, you don't even need a record.
So weird.
Because in general, you're guilty until you somehow prove yourself innocent.
That whole thing.
Which I have no idea how you're supposed to. Because how can you come up with corroborating witnesses 40 years later?
Sure, but what's weird about that too is that to think that someone is the same person
that they were at that time.
20, 30 years later that they were when they did that. Like, come on, everyone's made mistakes. And I told my son that when he started getting online and stuff.
I have friends that I've known for, 30, 35, 40 years. And I know we talk about that, like, hey, I was a complete and utter jerk as a kid.
Right.
I'll admit it right now. Like, a horrible jerkwad. I am hopefully not that person anymore. I've moved on in life. I don't think I have a huge reputation for being a complete and utter jerkwad anymore.
No, I mean not in my experience.
I try my best.
Who's your guest today? This jerkwad, Justin.
Yep, he's a terrible person. Yep. Kicks kittens, does horrible things. Just expletives all the time to grandmothers. Just a horrible person. But, you grow up and hopefully, you're not who you were when you were 20.
Right.
21, 25, or even 30, 35.
I feel bad for those people that are.
Well, there's a big group of people.
That just never grew up. Never changed, never learned those lessons. I know a few of those people.
I find that an interesting psychological examination.
For sure.
And when you see people that generally have mentally decided that they remember the best part of their life is like, say, high school or college or anything, and it's kind of, you don't see them much anymore, but growing up, in the 90s, remember when you see the person that was dressed like Mr. Furley?
Oh, yeah.
And like with the full butterfly collars and the plaid suit, and they had the whole thing, and they were just like 1974.
The leisure suit, yeah.
Full leisure suit. And the reason being...
all polyester.
is they went to work one day. An attractive person probably said, "You look fantastic today."
And they stuck with it.
And they were just like, this is the way that I'm going to be forever, because it works. And it's a self-esteem issue like everyone has.
Yep.
But it's just amazing when you see someone just not progress on in life, like
they're
change
trapped
in any way.
When you see someone trapped totally in a time period, it is bizarre. I've talked to people that use their current language is trapped in the time period that they just have locked themselves down in, and when you talk about the terms that we used to use, like saying gay as oh, that's stupid or funny now, right? It's a derogatory term, and now it's offensive, super offensive. We're more aware of it now. But there's people that's still right. But there's people that's still their language, right? They're still throwing it out just like they did when they were a kid, and it's weird to not see. I don't want to say it's weird, but it's just, to me, it's kind of, wow, you haven't evolved with the rest of the world. You've just locked yourself in this little time period. And I think it's easy to do sometimes. Like you said, it could be that one pivotal moment, that feedback that was like, this works, this is what I'm doing from here on out.
But it's also your surroundings. If your friends and family do the exact same thing, then
true.
What kind of transition would it be? It doesn't make any sense. So it's going to be who you're around. Like, as you advance, you sort of change compatriots and work partners and so forth.
Right.
But you might have that person who still talks to the same people for 40 years, works in the same job for 40 years, and
they don't get any more outside stimuli, and they're
change.
In a bubble almost.
Yeah. Well, you see that with television and in news. People tend to pick one news source and they stay with that, and that's because if you go looking in today's society and you go looking for a certain piece of feedback, you can find that very easily. Mm-hmm. I can come up with the most obscure theory
and find something to fit that worldview or that narrative for sure.
Do a Google search and be like, oh, everybody agrees with me.
And then
it's all good.
I think there is a huge problem with echo chambers, right? And people being able to find that common ground, even if it's not really so common.
What I think is worse is the fact that you can't have an agreeable disagreement.
No, it's really hard.
Because
everything turns so confrontational so quickly.
They fight, they throw excessive connotations onto things. Like, comparing anything right now, just overuse of the term like fascism or Nazis or things like that, there is no comparison. You can say that it's rude or terrible, it's like that, but it's an insult to people who actually survived a concentration camp or something to that effect.
Right.
It is absolutely shocking, the comparisons that people go to huge heights to do because they just want to make somebody seem like the worst person in the world. And then, they're just like, if this continues down this path, as of recently, nuclear Armageddon.
Oh, yeah.
And you're just like...
what's funny is I was watching...
Unlikely. And I'm not trying to espouse a certain side or thing. It's just putting that out there is very scary.
It is.
To children, to everyone else, to different things. And one would hope that, you realize there's no success in that path. I think that's what people realized over time. Like, what are you going to rule over when there's nothing
when
there?
there's nothing left? Yeah. So and it's funny that you bring up the nuclear thing, because I was just watching something the other day, and what's his name, Neil deGrasse Tyson, right, the astrophysicist guy. He's pretty interesting.
Yes.
But it was funny. He was on a
Brilliant
show,
man.
and they were talking about, okay, what happens if, say, Putin starts launching nukes, right? Oh, the fallout, the radiation everywhere. And it was interesting, and I think it kind of lends itself
the laddering of everybody
reacting. But his point was that the fallout isn't as much of an issue anymore, because we've developed over time low-yield nuclear weapons, tactical nukes, where there isn't that chance of the wind carrying this nuclear, radiation all around the world and affecting everyone, being something crazy like Chernobyl or Hiroshima, any of those things, where there's all this fallout and this radiation that traveled. His point was, depending on the bomb they use, if it's a hydrogen bomb, there's barely any radiation. So like that, but when everyone thinks of nuclear, we think of that radiation. Oh man, if they set it off, it's going to turn into a wasteland. And yeah, anybody that's in that vicinity is going to just vaporize from the destructiveness of that bomb, but it's not going to cause this radiation cloud to spread to other countries and other places.
It's the long-term effects where, you've got the electromagnetic problems afterwards. Yeah. You're rebuilding essential resources. Like, it does become a wasteland, like, not to the point where you wouldn't be able to live there, but it would take years, and the rebuilding process would take decades, and essentially you're getting something that's almost like in a medieval state. So where is that benefit?
I think what's interesting is
plus you're alienating yourself to the entire world.
Oh, for sure. I think what's interesting is how people in general have this like torture porn addiction, in a sense, because if you look at like popular movies, popular video games, popular literature, right, post-apocalyptic wastelands, constant theme in games and in movies and in
it's
media,
everyone.
right?
Yeah, it's a fascination.
And it's always like, it's whether it's the end of the world because of nuclear war, or it's the end of the world because we built robots and they took over, or if it's some kind of disease or zombies or anything. Like I'm playing a game right now where it's like a post-apocalyptic world because zombies.
People love negativity.
It is. It's like this weird sickness. So then, I don't want to say sickness, but this weird, sick perversion or obsession with these things. And then when those situations feel like they could be real, like what's going on right now, then it's like, oh crap, like this is what could happen. And we hope that, right, everyone would be sensible and be like, well, I'm not going to do that, because then they're going to do this and they're going to do that, and I'm going to have to do this, and what's it really going to leave left over? But I think the problem is throughout history, once in a while, we get a weirdo or we get a person, maybe I shouldn't say weirdo, we get a person that doesn't give a fuck. They want to see things burn. And usually those things are contained to smaller kind of instances, right? Little bombings and stuff like that.
Well, I think it's when you have people that feel the sacrifice of themselves and everyone around them for the greater good and I'm not assigning it to anything. It's just, there's a lot of people like that.
Right.
There's a good group in society where they do not care. It's that kamikaze suicide bomber type mentality where they don't, that's the danger. Because you're not concerned even about your family or so forth, because you're like, if I sacrifice my entire family for the greater good, like, this is fantastic. It's that's the danger. And I don't see that in a political sense. I see that more in a religion sense, which can be any of them.
Yeah,
but,
it's just a wild thing to see and to have to deal with and to have to worry about, because I mean, there is that fear, like right now, that Russia, their leader, I mean, depending on what news source you listen to, and we're obviously not in Russia, so everything that we're getting is filtered out. It's reporting, and it's filtered through their channels, through whatever we're getting. It's like a huge game of telephone, so you never know what's really, really going on. But I mean, if he was getting that kind of crazy, and feeling like it's a last option. Like there's that real fear there. There is a very real fear. And I don't know if like we ever recovered from the fear of the Cold War. I mean, yeah, I didn't have to do bomb drills when I was in school, like maybe my parents did.
Well, I think.
But like that memory collectively is still there of the last time something nuts happened.
It's worse now as a kid, as a child. Like,
oh, for sure.
Than what it is there because of collective panic, which is the exact same thing as the Cold War. You know?
Right.
So, you know, I feel like there was, other than the Cuban Missile Crisis, there was little chance of that. It was more posturing. You know, you had Khrushchev who said, "We're going to bury you," which immortalized by Sting, by the way. But anyways, I mean, when he put that out there, it caused great panic. It was a huge one because it was the exact same post as that is almost exactly the same as what's happening right now. It's instilling fear. However, you know, when you think of, and I'm not trying to make a political point right now, I'm just saying as a parent that had their kid go through school, these shooting drills that constantly happen all the time put children in sheer panic. They put parents in sheer panic.
Yeah.
I think I looked it up, and you have, I believe, a fairly reasonable chance, like 1 in 360,000 of winning $1 million in your life.
Yeah, I believe like you have a better chance of winning the lotto or being struck by lightning than you do of actually being involved in like a shooting.
Better chance of both happening.
Of being in like a mass shooting thing. And again,
and I'm not doing a political diatribe. I'm just saying that it has to do with putting it out there and making it seem, you know, chat rooms talk next door, whatever it may be. Everyone brings this up like it's a for certain chance that a child will have this happen in their lifetime. That is a belief amongst many, many people. And we have to prepare the child for what's happening at this. And I'd say, you know, chance-wise, you'd have a better payoff for preparing the child for winning $1 million. Like how to balance winning $1 million. You're going to have more success during their lifetime doing something like that, which sounds obscene. But we're going to do all these different things and instill fear. And we've done this within workplaces and other things like that. And it's a hard balance because is it good to be prepared for it on the off chance, or are you much like, you know, comedians, I can't remember which comedian it was just like, hey, you realize you're just instructing the kids on where to go.
Dave Chappelle.
Dave Chappelle.
Chappelle had that joke. He was like most school shooters are people from that school, and they know the plan. Yeah. And I think having it hit so close to home, right? For me, the one that happened in Oxford. So in Oxford, Michigan, there was a high school shooting, and that hit close to home because one, it's only a few towns away from me, but that's where we started looking to move, right? So had we actually picked a house in Oxford, my son would have been in that school that day that shooting happened. And I think that's part of the fear, right? Is, yeah, statistically, I have a greater chance of winning the lottery or being struck by lightning, whatever other things I have a chance of happening are. But the fact that it could happen anytime, anywhere is what I know. But I think that's the thing that scares people the most is just that, man, yeah, it's not going to happen here till it does. And then it's like, oh, shit. And you don't want to be in that position. So I think that's where a lot of that comes from. Isn't so much that like, oh, I know that it's probably never going to happen. It's just like, it's probably never going to happen till it does. So what do I do to prevent it from happening? Yeah. And it is frustrating. You know, when we went to school, I had tornado drills and fire drills. That's all I had. I never had these Alice drills where they got to practice how to do all this stuff. And it's really, it sucks. I feel bad. And you said something earlier about you felt bad that your son doesn't know what it was like to be as free as we were, and I took it in a different direction in my head. You started talking about like, hey, everything's kind of watching you and monitoring you, and I was looking at it from the perspective of, we were free from these things now that everyone worries about. We were free from all the technology that ties us down now. Even myself, I'm on a cell phone all the time, right? Like I just listed some stuff for sale on Facebook, and I'm glued to my phone. I'm checking every couple minutes. Did someone just message me? Did someone update? Is there someone that wants the stuff that I'm trying to sell? Even like if I post episodes, hey, how's this reception going? There's always something to kind of keep you glued to technology. And if I'm not on a phone, I'm probably watching TV or playing a video game or doing something on a computer. So it's like, people don't know the freedom from that stuff anymore like we did, right? Yeah. And then the freedom of these extra stressors. And it's really weird. It's actually not really weird. I think it's very convenient that fear is possibly the biggest motivator for everything. Because if you look at like, okay, and again, we're not trying to get overly political here, right? But if you look at the current state of things, both sides or every side utilizes fear as a motivator to achieve these things. Yes. Oh, if you don't go do this, then they're taking away all that. And if you don't fight them, then they're going to instill all these things. And it's just a back and forth clash of just being afraid about everything. Panic. And it is. And it sucks to see because, one, I don't want my kids to grow up having to be worried about everything.
Because of the extremism by both sides in their posturing. And it has...
There's so much posturing.
I'm trying to kind of roll it back to what we'll be talking about a little bit later. Like, how is this going to...
Do me a favor real quick. You move it toward so it's in front of your face a little bit more. If you're more comfortable where you were, just get it kind of more out in front of you. Because you keep talking off to the side.
All right.
There you go. Yeah, it sounds way clearer. Thanks.
Apologies.
It's cool. It's been a while, man. It's been like 2 years.
Yeah. It's been a long time since I've spoken to a microphone, I will tell you that. But what I worry about, and going back to the long-term discussion at hand, is mental health. Yeah. And so what will this do to those children? Are we effectually creating more
problems? More mental health problems for sure.
Well, more of these people that cause damage to others because we've given them different things. Like I personally, it's a personal opinion, feel that the media is at fault for most of these things. And it started when we were younger with Columbine, because I can tell you at least one of those names right off the top of my head because they became infamous.
Oh, for sure.
And what do you want to do? When I was a young child, I was always very sick. I had a lot of illnesses throughout my life, and there was a time where prior to me graduating high school, I did stupid stuff while I was in high school because I didn't think that I would live past 20 at that time.
Right. Kind of like a fuck it.
And one of those things that as a child you want to feel like your life is important. So if nobody's going to remember you as a child, like, what would be more awesome than going out in a blaze of glory? Like, for me, I would never have picked that route, but I remember being a young kid who was like 16 years old and feeling stressed out and everything else. And I'm thinking, what if I rent a U-Haul truck, go to Niagara Falls, have my friends set up a ramp, and I just jump into that at like 80 miles an hour.
As only a kid would imagine.
And just do the sweetest suicide that anybody's ever seen, where you just do this thing. And granted, that's incredibly negative. But I'm thinking to myself, like, that's a blaze of glory way to go out. Like, everybody's going to remember that. That's going to be at books and discussions and all these other things. If you're not noticed and you're completely alone and feeling distraught as a high school student right now, you're like, I can become famous tomorrow. Everyone will talk about me. Everyone will discuss this. I am no longer hidden. I am no longer a nobody. I am now that guy. And I think that's why you see that personality type constantly reenacting, because of this constant cycle where we're just like, we have to talk about this forever. And is there a great solution for this? I don't know. I would prefer that the names are always kept hidden, that there's just nothing discussed about it, that it happened, it's a terrible event, but, we're secretly prosecuting this person, they're in prison forever, and you'll never know the name. Because I feel
but even then, I think that's too hard to hide, right? Wait, why isn't this person in school anymore? He wasn't buried, and he's not in school.
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult,
but
I'd just rather come up with some way to make it so you don't become infamous, which is hard.
I get that. Like, I think the deeper issue is what drives people to want that, right? Because there was a point
to the social media fame that people have.
I don't even think it's social media. If you take it, it's just pure history, right? We learn in school these famous figures that did these things. That's why they're famous. And even before social media, if you want to, media itself is social, period, right? The news is social media on a grander.
For myself, for my betterment and happiness, I almost have to avoid national news programs because of the slants and because of the panic and the freak outs that everybody has all the time, and the huge overwrought things that are going to be there.
It's hard to deal with. Like we said, it's a lot of negativity, a lot of fear.
Watching the morning news and when I have my coffee, and I don't mind the hey, we're at the here they're having the farmers market and they're doing this, and when there's things that are kind of enjoyable,
it's pumpkin spice season. Woo!
Yeah, everybody pumpkin spice is at Starbucks now. It's exciting. We're all here, and just that water skiing squirrel mentality,
right?
And that's what I grew up on. The national news was not as negatively focused when I was. It became, with the advent of the 24-hour news cycle with CNN, that's when this became a thing for all the young folks out there that think that nothing existed before you can remember. There was a time where it was...
Your local news was all you could get.
Where your local news was somewhat entertaining and honest, by the way, and somewhat just informational.
I think cable obviously helped spur that along, right? Because if you think about it before, and again, this might be wild for anyone younger listening, but before you just had certain dials. Like when I was growing up, it was 2, 4, 7, I think. And then
I missed the sound
of 50, you would turn a dial and you would mess with the antennas to try to get the picture to come in great. Your source of information was so limited, and generally what you were tuning into was the local station. So it wasn't they had the nationally broadcast programs, and sometimes you would have those national news events and things like that. But a lot of times it was local, and you got your local newspaper. So it was a lot more reporting and a lot less opinion, and it was local to your environment, your neighborhood. It wasn't all of this stuff that's happening everywhere just coming to you at once. Yeah. And cable changed that because it was able to get outside of just your local environment.
When an opinion piece was clearly labeled as an opinion piece.
It was able to get outside of that bubble.
This is the opinion of whoever.
Right.
And it's just they would actually pause the thing and then put, a little header up that's this is an opinion piece by Bob whoever,
right?
And so,
or even in the newspapers, your byline, right?
Just
everything's
I remember
opinion.
Years back, and now it's almost a forgotten television show.
Everything's an opinion now.
The Daily Show, which is now kind of forgotten. It barely gets 400,000 viewers, but at the time, 10 years ago, at its peak of popularity, when they did surveys, they actually were just most people get their news from the Daily Show.
Right.
You're just okay, you do realize
it's a comedy show.
It's a comedy show that's opinion based. Okay, that makes no sense. And that's that was a telltale sign that, people could not separate.
And I think that's the problem, right? And as technology has gotten better, it's been harder for people to separate. And then other people capitalize on that. Lots of people capitalize on the fact that you can't tell the difference, and it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. The fact that like you can have these deep fakes now, right, where I could superimpose your head onto something that wasn't you, and it looks real and believable. Or I could superimpose your voice. Right. It's getting shockingly good. There's technology now. I saw this. There's an app you can take an old photo and you can scan it with this app and it will literally bring the photo to life and look like your ancestor, whoever's in that photo, is alive and moving around. And it looks scarily real. So it's crazy where we're getting to, and it brings back to the fear, right, of like, what's going to happen in the future? Is AI going to take over and the robots are going to kill us and all that stuff? Like, I doubt that. I mean, if it's going to happen, it's going to be a ways away, but the technology is getting it's blurring the lines a lot.
We're very, very shortly away from the idea that almost anything that you see or hear.
Total difference.
Yep. Sorry. Everybody's going to hate me on this because
Justin really does not like the mic in his face, and so he keeps moving around the microphone.
It is. It's awkward. My rapping career is dead.
So if you're comfortable sitting in that position, you can just move the mic over more so it's where you're sitting.
All right. We'll make the noise.
Yeah, there you go.
There.
That might be a little better.
All right. Apologies to everyone.
You sound so much clearer and with such a better like baritone. Is it baritone, the deep one? Voice.
I would hope. I always feel like I sound like I talk through my nose, which is
it's deep. So do I. But I think that's just because you internally hear the nasally voice.
Yeah.
Because I feel the same way.
Or when you listen to a replay of yourself, do you not hate it?
Well, yeah.
Or have you gotten used to it?
It's not that.
I don't think anybody likes their voice because it's different than what they hear in their head.
Right. I'm not totally hating on it anymore because I've had to listen to myself so much. But for sure, like, oh, that sounds so stupid. Really, my voice sounds like that? Yeah. Like people tell me I sound like Seth Rogen all the time, and I do not hear it.
Those are the times when I'm incredibly jealous of the people that do like car ads and things like that. I remember when they would have just like the certain two people in the 80s that would do every trailer.
Oh, yeah.
There's
in the time. Like, it was, yeah.
In the time of spaceships. And there's like, bum. And then,
at the end of the world.
A barbarian lived in the, Beastmaster.
Right.
Like,
oh, yeah.
And like, oh, he has pet ferrets. I'm in on this. Like, that's cool.
I loved that movie when I was a kid for some reason. You ever go back and you look at those movies and you're like, what the fuck was I on? What the fuck were they on making these movies? This half-naked guy runs around with two ferrets and, like, is stopping some weird...
Those ferrets were incredibly helpful.
There was some weird, like, Batmen kind of things that wrap people up and, like, instantly vaporized them and shit. Yeah, some wild
Digested them.
Wild stuff.
It's great.
And then what was another one? Kroll? Was that what it was called?
The glaive.
With the glaive. And he rode the horses that like left flame trails. You know, when I was a kid, I thought those horses really could do that.
I apologize. And I'm going to apologize right now for my next statement to whoever it is. But
whoever needs to hear the apology.
Like whoever needs to hear the apology that's in this. But if you have a very long black trench coat and you own a glaive, I'm scared of you.
Yeah, I'm scared of you.
I'm just going to put it out there right now. I am a little scared.
Oh, man.
That's territory where I'm a little bit creeped out,
Right.
It's like it's just like, I just hope you stay busy, my friend.
Don't focus on me.
Yep. Don't bother me. I personally think you're a fantastic person.
Oh man! Now you know what to do if you want to scare Justin. Now you know what to do.
Yeah. Have I ever? I want to go back on the discussion that we just had a smidgen, like about fear and about school and how these aren't entirely new notions.
No.
But have I told you the story? And this is to anybody that has Google ready, feel free to look it up.
Yeah, we are not fact-checking anything here, so take everything we say with a grain of salt. We're not experts. We're not medical health professionals.
Well, this is something from my life.
But just, yeah.
I, in the realm of things, went to high school, graduated with a mass murderer.
Something of this rings.
Yeah. And so
I think you told me about this because I looked it up too. I think after you told me about it. One of our conversations we just had one day shooting the shit. And
this is one of those things that changes people, because I went to school with he's long gone, with a person that you can Google. His name is Dean Melberg. And Dean Melberg was a very odd character in high school. He was the person that basically shows every sign that there's something awry. There's something awry, and this is one of the things that I worry about, is like these issues need to be addressed, not with a huge sweeping blanket, because we don't want somebody's parent to be upset or something to that effect. But I feel like most of these situations, there's warnings, there's issues that are afoot that are completely being ignored, and this person would laugh maniacally in class. He would do very, very odd things, completely out of control. And I sort of kept my distance, I'll admit. Right? I'm just like, hey, there's something here. And not necessarily followed by the rest of people, because this is the late 80s, early 90s. This is 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, the peak of being able to just legitimately bully people.
Yeah.
Sometimes you see people and you're just like, those are not to be messed with, and you use your logic. Now, this young man graduated high school, and it wasn't even a year before I was watching the regular afternoon news. They broke in as my best friend and I were sharing an apartment, and the news came in and said there's a shooting going on at an Air Force base in Seattle right now. There's numerous dead, and then very quickly thereafter, the shooter has been killed, and then they're sorting out the situation. So what we ended up with was, sometimes, and I'm certainly not saying anything negative about anybody who's ever been in the military. I would have loved to have been in the military myself if I could have passed a medical exam. My grandparents were in there, my cousins are in there, everybody's in there. But there is the occasional person or persons that join the military for the wrong reason.
For sure.
And sometimes,
I think you could say that about any position of authority.
Any job or position of authority. That's
sure.
One of the problems we have with policing.
Yep,
I think 99.9% of policing, it's just fine. 0.01, not okay.
Yep.
But what we've got into the situation that this arose is, sometimes people go in there to become a man. Mm-hmm. And this was a choice that I believe he took. And he had gone in there and done, there's books about this that psychoanalyze the entire issues, but let's say he exhibited some very strange actions, and exposing himself to other people, doing very crazy things, just basically making his roommate, while he's there, life a living hell. And he had filed numerous complaints. There was numerous issues out there. And I had a friend that was also in there who, from what I understand, had the ability to look at some of these situations post the shooting. From what I understand, and this is slightly different than what's said in the book, but these are things that I've heard from people that I trust. When he was interviewed after the situations were reported by the military psychologist, he exhibited incredible psychotic traits. So he was asked, and this is something that I heard secondhand. This is not in the book, but this is what I heard. One of the reasons he was discharged is that when asked why he joined the military, he explained that he was there to train to kill everyone at our high school reunion.
Wow. Yeah, that's a red flag.
So he was discharged for mental reasons. Unfortunately, and this is something that you can see there, sometimes those military medical records don't transfer very well, and he was able to buy a weapon immediately afterwards. He went back to the Air Force Base, and the first two people that he killed was the receptionist for the psychologist and the psychologist, and then went on a rampage. So the only reason that in my understanding that did not happen at a high school reunion is because he broke early. So have I been to any of those? Not a one. Not a single one.
There's plenty of reasons not to go to your high school reunion.
Yep. And
that's an extra layer, right?
But it's something that I thought of because you're just like, I'm not sure. I remember the focus that people have on the bullying that happened at that time. I with my ex-wife, I went to a high school reunion for Farmington Hills High School, and I was shocked that one person there, and this is, I don't know, 20 years after they graduated or 15 right. or whatever it may be. One person spent the entire time going around airing their grievances to everyone about what had happened in high school. And I was just like, this is...
Like you're holding on to this shit for that long?
Like you held on to this for that long. Like that to me is a trait that's really kind of scary. Like they had come up and said, back in high school, you said this certain thing. And I was just like, this is the reason why I don't come to these things, because people hold on to these things like that.
Their entire life.
Like their entire life.
I think so.
It's so scary. Like, it's so weird.
There's a couple of things
that people don't address.
There's a couple of things that you touched on there that I think, so one being the odd person in school, right? So obviously the mental health profession, the mental health diagnoses, just mental health processes, right, have hopefully gotten better since then, right? It's at least it's more of a conversation now.
I would hope so, but what I see in these things...
Is it where it needs to be? I don't think so.
It seems questionable.
Right. I think it's better than it was, but I don't think it's where it needs to be by far. It feels like, even like when I was growing up and even now, it's more spoken about, but it's still a kind of, let's just treat it with give you a pill to make you feel better and not deal with these things. Another thing that you said that I agree with, right, is I don't think that for mental health, and that's the overarching theme of what we're talking about, I don't think that there's a blanket, like you were saying, we can't just have a blanket thing, we're going to piss off people. Like, I don't think there's a blanket answer. And I think, unfortunately, what people want is that blanket answer. What's that cure-all? And there isn't.
There is no perfection.
And I think it's unfortunate that I feel like so many people want that as the answer, right?
Yep.
That we just need to have this blanket thing where it's an individual basis. When you say that someone is odd and they behave weird at school and you were like, there's something off on this guy. Nowadays, and this is again just my opinion, my interpretation of things, is you might get someone that says, well, maybe they were weird because you took a step back. If you would have just befriended that person.
And that's an entire possibility.
But I think inherently, right, we sense those things. It's a survival game. And you sense if something's off, there's a reason why inside you were like, I need to get away from that. And
I know, but
could a friend have made a difference? Sure.
Yeah.
But again, I think there is larger issues that get ignored, right? And I think some of those things get perpetuated still now. You don't want to be the snitch. You don't want to be someone that turns them in. What happens to snitches? I mean, that still goes around.
Well, here's where the rights, the difficulty between the rights of someone to just do it. do what they do, and the rights of the school or the other people, this is where the hard part is what could you do that doesn't violate someone's
individual rights versus like
rights.
I would say I would almost look at it as like individual rights versus the rights of like society or
Yep. And that's what the constant argument is
with everything
on both sides.
For sure.
Both sides are like, let's violate everyone's rights to make me feel better. Now, what needs to be found is a happy medium. Like a happy medium is a great place for me as somebody who's there. So one of the biggest issues I feel in people avoiding help is stigma. And I'm gonna stick on that big. And it means that it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm gonna judge somebody on that. What we do in our society is people are scared to seek help because it will destroy their life and take away their rights if they do in our system under numerous ways. So let's say I grew up my entire life. I won't even touch that one yet. Like that one, what I'm going to say next is controversial, but I'll hit on it. But what if there's questionable things, but we give the school the right to say, hey, we've just noticed some things. So one of the things that we'd like is just not to kick this child out of school, not to force anything, not to move them in a different area or anything like that. But do you think as a parent that you could please take them to somebody just for an analysis? They're not allowed to say that. So that child won't do that. One of the reasons that stigma comes into play immediately is their parents are like, well, if something is wrong with my child, it will follow them throughout the rest of their lives. I'm basically destroying their life by saying that they need to be, per se, temporarily hospitalized or whatever it may be. If I do that to an 18-year-old child, for the rest of their life, they now need to write it down that they've been institutionalized. They've lost their rights to do innumerable things on something that can be a passing illness, something that can be treated, something that can be taken care of. So I'm hesitant as a parent to address that issue. I'm hesitant if they say, hey, could you do that? And that doctor comes back and says, I think it would be very helpful if we do some sort of medication or maybe a short-term hospitalization to help get this under control. You can't do that. Because now, the minute that they say that, this child's life is ruined. And I'm going to now step to the next one that I feel is going to be the controversial one. One of the biggest things out there right now that people love to talk about, and is a legitimate conversation, are things like red flag laws. Mm-hmm. And red flag laws, I can see the reason behind the discussion. But let's say I grew up my entire life hunting with my family. Like, this is a thing that I do. It's part of my lifestyle. Even though if you're listening and this is not a part of your lifestyle, trust me, it's a sport. People do it. Like, it's very exciting, and not everybody who touches a gun is a mass murderer. Like, I'm sorry.
Not everyone that hunts is a gun lover, like a gun nut either.
Yeah, but it doesn't really matter in my mind. But what happens is, let's say I've got a temporary illness, which mental health is just oftentimes no different than a flu, like COVID, something like that. It's a chemical imbalance within your brain that can be treated, and you can go on to live a perfectly normal life. You can go on to live everything just fine. However, for the entire rest of my life, I can never own a weapon again, even if I go to court and have myself declared perfectly all right because I was committed that one time. It has changed. Now, would you also be okay if I said that without anything at all, let's take that out of the equation, but I just say that I think the next door neighbor shouldn't drive anymore? Without a hearing, without anything that goes, like without a doctor's analysis, without anything, just me saying that I don't trust them, that you should have your driver's license and your car seized. What would be fantastic is to have you, like, I can see a temporary thing, but there has to be a solution out of that.
Even for the car one, you could just say once you reach a certain age,
you
can't drive anymore. Like,
yeah, but I'm just saying, like, there has to be a way out of it to avoid people from treating themselves. And I'm only choosing this because it's the most commonly used one right now.
Right.
There's numerous other things. Like, there's inabilities for me to have certain jobs. There's inabilities for me to have other things because I went out of my way and felt ill and treated myself. And because of the stigma that has been placed under our country, there is no cure in the law's eyes. Like, in the way that we treat that in employment, careers, rights, all those things can be taken away if I say that I need help. So are those people that are desperately in need of help going to reach out for help if they feel like that's in the back of their mind? Like, that's one of those things that I think would really, really help. Those people who are mentally unstable and fixated on weaponry are never going to get treated because they know what will happen.
If they do. It's you bring up a lot of good points, and it's a weird thing. I've had personal experience with some of all of this, right? My son, when he was 16 or 17, right? We were looking through his room because he was doing some shady shit, and he had some razor blades, and he had been cutting himself and talking about how he wanted to kill himself. So we took him to a hospital because it was the idea of going to the hospital wasn't like, oh, you're crazy. It was, there's possibly other methods. So he was already seeing a psychologist and a therapist because he has other issues with his mom and not being involved in his life and stuff like that. Like, he had things emotionally that he needed to deal with. And we always supported trying to help him find ways of dealing with that, right? But at the point that he was hurting himself, it was obvious, okay, we need to take you to the hospital. If you talk to him now, obviously, there's nothing that he feels it destroyed his life. Some of it was just that normal childhood stuff like you're talking about, right? Like they're going to, sometimes they grow out of these things, or it's a phase or a period of time in their life. He was depressed because he felt like he had no freedoms, and he was on that border of being a teenager, wanting to be an adult, but not wanting any of the responsibility and hating
not
us.
Not that writes that off.
No, not at all. But like, it's common
it
themes,
happens,
right?
Yeah.
And it does. And then after he got out of the hospital, he had met a girl in the hospital, and then they had started talking, and then that fell apart. So then he was trying to strangle himself with his shoelaces, and it was back to the hospital. Actually, we went to the hospital for them to do an evaluation. So the whole process now, at least in Michigan, is you have to go to an actual hospital, have them evaluate you to determine, do you actually need to go to a mental health treatment facility? And they were like, nah, he doesn't need it. This right here is just purely him acting out. Yeah. The second time. And then on the way home, he tried to jump out of my car while I was driving. I had to hold him. He started assaulting me. It turned into the police getting involved, and he went right back to the hospital and then did another stay. And it was really interesting because part of him getting out of the mental health facility the second time was he had to do an outpatient thing for like a month. And I had to drive him to it every day. He had to go do this outpatient thing. And meeting with one of the therapists there, it was really, really interesting. And I think now he sees more of this stuff, that a lot of it was just behavioral, where he just didn't want to accept how things were or the way things were going and his ability to change it, because the therapist brought up at the point that the police were intervening when he was assaulting me. And she was like, do you think that was behavioral or that was like a condition? And he was like, oh, it's just all my things going on and I'm just mental. And she goes, did your behavior stop as soon as the police showed up? And he goes, yeah, it did. Like I stopped because I didn't want to get in more trouble with the police. And she goes, so right there, by the fact that you were able to instantly change your behavior indicates that the whole thing was behavioral, and you were just acting out instead of
because he was having a psychotic episode.
Because he didn't have the tools or the way to express himself or to handle it properly. So that's what that whole outpatient thing was trying to teach him, those tools. And you talk to him now, like, you know, even when he left the house, it was nightmare. He ran away, said he was going to kill himself. There was 4 patrol cars and myself out looking for him. Meanwhile, he caught a ride down to his mom's house, didn't tell anyone until he got there and all this stuff, you know. And it was just this big, long, dramatic thing. But you talk to him now, and he thinks, one, moving out, or I don't think he'll tell you that running away and doing what he did was the best thing, but moving out was the best. But then he's also apologized for everything. And he said, he goes, I feel that mentally I'm way better now. I don't feel trapped. And I go, yeah, you felt trapped because this was all you knew. And you thought everything was going to be so much better when you got out. And now you're out, you see that actually it wasn't that bad, but you feel better because you don't feel trapped anymore. I was like, of course, you're going to feel depressed. You're going to feel like everything's out of your control if you feel trapped and like you have nowhere to go. And he said, he was like, you know, I was an idiot when I was at your house. And I said, yeah, I agree. You were an idiot when you were here, you know. But
I remember telling my parents the exact same thing.
Everything was not as bad as he thought it was because now he gets a dose of what it's really like once he got that adult thing. And he still doesn't. He lives with his grandma. So he still doesn't. He has no bills besides like his cell phone, right? Yeah. So he still hasn't gotten the full reality of being an adult and being on his own. But it was, and that was one of our fears was that I know people, and we had talked about it, that never grow up. I know people personally that have never grown up or that they have just ran away from the issues that rather than work on them, come up with every excuse why not to. Oh, there's no therapist that's qualified enough to deal with me. I need to talk to people that deal with serial killers and stuff this is people I know have really said this shit. And it's part of that stigma of like coming up with excuses to not get treated, because I think admitting to yourself that you need help is a really hard thing to do for some people, because I think
in your head you think that it's a huge impact in the public.
Well, with the public perception that there's something wrong with me, and then with the internal thought of maybe there's something wrong with me, I'm broken, when it could be something you just don't have the tools or the right way to deal with the things that you're dealing with. And when we talk about like, no, there can't be a blanket solution. It has to be individual, because there's things that I've dealt with in my life that I feel like I've moved past them. I'm fine. But I've seen people deal with something that I perceive to be a lesser trauma, and it's ruined their lives. And I'm like, I went through shit that was 10 times harder than that, and I'm fine. So
but it's your perception?
But it's my perception, how it impacted them. So then that's what makes it difficult, and why there can't be no blanket thing, because everything impacts people differently, and they process it differently. And to just blanket say this is a solution for things doesn't help. And that's where I feel like the mental health policies now and the processes now they deal with it on an individual level to a degree, but then there's like this overarching, hey, this is what it is. And I think that it's very illuminating to see that as things have progressed, right? Back in the day, any of these behaviors, we would have just locked you up and gave you a lobotomy and electroshock therapy and all this crap. Oh, yeah. Right? For all these things. And you get people like, oh, why is autism so common now? Because we've learned to diagnose it better and recognize that there's different varying levels. Like the science and what we understand of these things has gotten better. So yeah, more people fit that spectrum. Doesn't mean that if your kid has autism that they're incapable of functioning in life. There's extremes, and there's people that are functioning or real low level. And so I think it's gotten better, right? All that mental health stuff, but there's still those stigmas. There's still that, and it goes back to, I think, what you were talking about with, hey, how do I get known? My life is going to be insignificant. How do I make it so that I'm known? I'm in the history books. And especially with social media now, where anyone can give the perception that they are living a life they really aren't. That was a huge thing with my son. You're preventing me from living my life. I could be at all these parties and stuff right now. And my response would be, who's knocking at my door? There ain't no one over here knocking on the door saying, hey, Dylan, come to all these parties. There's no one coming to knock down the door. And I told him, I said, Dylan.
You want a reason for something.
I was like, Dylan, how many times when you're at school do you bullshit and tell your friends that you did something over the weekend that you didn't really do? All the time. I go, they're doing the same thing to you. All these things that you feel like you're missing out on, Sometimes they are happening, sure. But the majority of the time, they're not. It's people just giving the perception that they're doing this. And I think that causes a larger problem now because it's everywhere all the time. Versus before it wasn't. It was isolated to your little community.
Yeah.
But
if you look at YouTube or whatever it is, like everything's edited down.
Mm-hmm.
These reality shows and everything edited down to the most exciting,
tell a narrative.
Like the most exciting, awesome thing, and all the life living in between is left out.
It is.
All the negativity is left out. Like, look at how awesome everything is. And this is one of those incredibly scary things, because it's like when you see somebody incredibly famous that you feel like has everything because you doubt yourself, and they do something incredibly negative to themselves.
They kill. You look at like Robin Williams, they killed themselves.
That's your misunderstanding, because your focus has been on everything that you're missing from their life, and everything that they focus on is what they're missing from your life. Like, so
yeah,
it really is a difficult perception, because each person is different in how they deal with things. Each person is different in how they perceive things. Each person is different in how they deal with things.
Right.
And to blanket it out, which is kind of what I was referring to by just making these changes to society, thinking that this is going to solve some problem. Like,
it's way more nuanced.
Do we have a mental health problem? We absolutely do.
Absolutely.
But I think addressing the fear of that person getting help and assistance would go miles. And also, let's also address the insurance issue and the coverage issue and everything else.
Yeah, that's a whole nother...
That's a whole nother argument. But that exists as well. And in our fervor to change always, so... you talked earlier about asylums and different things like that. These are non-existent today.
Right.
So...
because we've learned that they were ineffectual and they weren't working, and we've gotten...
However, I want to go back and just say, does it also help that we have people that are purely psychotic, that are living on the streets because there is nowhere for them to go?
Not at all.
And so... would asylums run properly in a modern facility with modern methods and different things like that help perhaps get people off the streets and perhaps get people help that they need, like on a greater level? Is that a possibility? Or should we just change the name, not have it be asylum, and then just be like, hey, like this is a facility, like a mental health facility, which makes it all sound better, like...
In theory, I think that would work, right? That would be a possible,
we're not going to go back ever to a place where there's...
I think the problem is...
and things like that.
I think the problem is money. The problem with most of our institutions is money. Gets involved, and you hear about multiple things, right? Even with, like, if you want to talk about, like, the opioid epidemic, or however you want to phrase it, right? That money gets involved. So even in a facility like that, it's easy to just get money involved. These people are horribly diagnosed. We're just going to give them medication. We're getting a kickback from the companies, etc. Okay, again, I'm paraphrasing this article that I read, and you can go look it up. I want to say Ohio, but I might be wrong. But there was at least 2 judges that were what the hell is it called when they're kid courts, like what is it?
I know what you mean,
for kids, right? For minors, whatever. Juvenile courts.
Yeah, we both thought
so
of it.
There's these juvenile judges, right? And they were sending kids to a what the fuck is the word now, to like a children's jail, essentially. Where I can't remember what you call it, juvenile hall, whatever you want to call whatever it is, right? Basically jail for kids. They were sending them
70s way juvenile
but
hall.
it was a pay to play game. They were getting kickbacks because it was a privately run facility. So these judges were sending kids for everything to go there, so they were getting kickbacks from the facility because the facility got X amount of dollars from the state and from the government for every head that they had there.
Oh, so you're getting concerned more of a regulation issue.
Well,
like an oversight.
Well, not even that, just the inherent possibility that we could have a hospital for this. But again, I'm saying you have this and I'm throwing on you this medication and you have to stay here because I'm getting a sweet check from someone, from the government, from the state, whatever way it is that I'm getting this money. So I'm going to keep as many people here as I can, just like school count day, right? Like that determines how much money they get for the fiscal year.
Hey, we're gonna get
we need
pizza,
every kid in here today. We need them all here, right? It's a money thing. That's the only reason they're doing
free money away.
Now, I do believe that schools deserve more money than they get most times because it is sad. People that I know that are teachers, it's horrible for them. But the overall idea that, like, in a perfect world, if money didn't rule so much and people weren't so corrupt for the sake of money and bettering themselves, I think ideas like what you were saying could work if we could guarantee to keep people from being misdiagnosed or put under certain medications just for the fact of someone's collecting a paycheck at the end of it.
But and this happens all the time. Is it a issue of we're automatically putting the cart before the horse and saying that it's going to be abused before we even try? Like, I think a lot of times things are not done because of the what if. And I'm not saying that this is a solution. I'm just saying we need treatment, some sort of treatment facilities for people instead of just abandoning them as
if we could keep it from being a private institution, there's maybe a chance. Because I
think that runs into state issues with budgeting.
But then you run into all that stuff too. This place doesn't get enough financing from the state budget or from the federal government, so you run into issues on both sides. Because I mean that's the current issue, right, with privatized prisons versus state and federally run prisons,
which they've done for budgetary reasons,
right? Yeah. But then you have these private prisons where they're doing things to make money, and it's someone is getting paid for those things, and so I
mean that happens with school lunches.
It happens with everything, right? And that's what I'm saying. So I don't think it's a knee jerk. Oh man, what if we have too many examples of it happening to rule it out as being a what if?
Well, I think it's also an example of needing additional thought because people want an instantaneous, easy solution.
They want an instant, for sure, 100%.
Like you have to do stepped actions.
Yeah, for sure.
So if there's something that you miss, you need to come back the next year and be like, I need to address this issue that seems to have come up. And I think a lot of times that's where our government fails, on a state level, on a federal level. They throw things at an issue, and then it's done. They don't come back to solve the trip hazards, like solve where the problem actually happened.
And I agree with that. And I think another layer of that is the tribalism that we see, like we were talking about earlier, right? Like there's a two sides or us versus them mentality, everything. It is really frustrating to see like a party come in, create rules, another party come in, try to undo everything the previous one did. Then the next party comes in, try to undo everything. Time. Right. And like that's really, really frustrating because it feels like the potential for advancement to happen gets lost in this us versus them battle that happens all the time. And it feels like that stymies progress in these things because it just, so like if you want to take like healthcare, right? So the big thing, Obama having Obamacare, and whether people are angry at that or not, like it helped me as a at the time self-employed person that didn't have healthcare. Like it helped me find reasonable healthcare that I could afford. Versus, hey, let's repeal Obamacare, but not really have a plan that was something better, right? Like the goal was there, let's just get rid of it because we hate it, the other party did it, but not having a solution there, so it never got done.
Like it'd be better to fix the problems.
Right.
You know, as somebody who had insurance, like my insurance went up to pay for that insurance. And so it's like, hey, like, why don't we figure something out where it's not just
and it's frustrating to say like, hey, let's just get rid of something because the other party did it, but not have a workable, better solution. And unfortunately that's the tribalism, the us versus them, right? An alternate, something that could have replaced it. So like that's the frustration is that we as everyday citizens see this back and forth is happening. Meanwhile, there's people that are just constantly getting screwed.
It's like privatizing Social Security. Like everybody, we want to do that, but what's going to happen to those folks that are just completely irresponsible, which is a huge segment of people that are just completely irresponsible. They will have nothing.
Right. And then there's those people, then it sucks. Like I went to school with a girl that, I can't remember what the disease is, but she had no hair at all.
Alopecia.
I don't think it was alopecia though. So alopecia is like she had no body hair, period. So there was something specific that it was called. I can't remember what it was, but I remember her telling me, this is in high school, like sophomore, junior year, telling me about how her parents can't get insurance for it because it's a pre-existing condition and they couldn't get any insurance to help her. And that's disgusting. Like that part, that's really disgusting. And that's where the whole money in things and insurance is a whole different topic.
Yeah.
Back to what we were talking about, like with the red flag stuff, I agree. Saying that someone in their teens or like an 18-year-old that has a mental health
that last for the whole life, and I only pick that because it's just something that's out there.
Well, no, but I think it's important to look at.
But it's important to look at because it's an example of that. One action labels somebody for the rest of their life.
Or one period of your life defines you for the rest of your life.
Defines you for
You have a mental health crisis in your early 20s doesn't mean that you are going to live with that mental health crisis the rest of your life.
You should be able to make it, and it shouldn't just be, hey, like it's been 5 years, everything's cool. Like that's fine. But there needs to be an actual organized system for clearing that issue. And not just there. I'm not saying that just that issue is the number one issue.
That's just,
but let's say
an example.
I want to be in the military or police officer or fireman or something to that effect, where somebody's going to ask, have you ever been committed to a mental institution on my form, because it's going to automatically out say no. But if it's like I'm 42 years old and this happened when I was 17 or 18 years old, I mean, I don't know how juvenile records pass, but unfortunately, maybe not that well because we've seen some issues recently.
Yeah.
But so let's say, I'm in college and I have issues or something like that, like 19, 20 years old. And at that point, I've been committed because I just got overwhelmed and things went bad and things went south.
Right.
And I was committed to an institution for a few months, and now things are just fine. Like I'm doing just well, and I'm now 40-ish years old. Like there needs to be a way for that to be a-okay.
Because there's the opposite, right? You could have went through your entire majority of your life with no issues at all, and now you're falling apart at 40.
Yep.
Right? Like it works both ways. So yeah, I definitely agree that we can't have that blanket thing.
I think that's a help. Because that falls on the blanket thing, like people are just like, oh, like, they were committed.
You had a mental health issue, you're always going to.
They're always going to be.
And that was my point, like with my son, right? Was that
and that's
he
the same
got
thing
out
with
of
a flu or something like that. Like if you have an illness, like no one does that to cancer patients or something like that. Like no one goes, hey, like you had cancer at 22, so now you're forever a cancer patient. They're just like, yeah, you're cured, awesome. Like this is fantastic. They have a party, they have a celebration. Unfortunately, with stigma, that person who was committed for the rest of their life, their family is going to be worried about them.
And that's the fear, right? We were talking about.
Everybody's going to be concerned about them. They're going to be like, how you feeling? All right. Like any kind of little action or reaction, which is fine. Like it's fine to
be aware
and be aware. But if somebody has a bad day because they just are having a bad day, doesn't mean that they fell off and went completely back to where they were 22 years ago.
Right.
Like that's one of the biggest concerns I have, and helping eliminate the way people feel. Because in their mind, for everybody, if I say that I had some sort of mental issue, that's a heavy thing. 'Cause
it is.
Forever.
To even come to terms where you can come out and say it and admit it. Again, I think that's a hard thing to do to yourself. To take a step back and self-recognize and say, you know what, something is wrong. I need help. I don't know how to deal with this and get past this. I need help. I think that's a hard thing for people to do. And then again, because there is the social stigma, there is the am I broken personal issue with it. I agree. Like that's the hardest part. I mean, it's like what do they say, like for like Alcoholics Anonymous or whatever, like admitting you have a problem is the first step. And sometimes that's the hardest step to get over. And people,
it's the most difficult I think for alcoholics and for people with mental health
and it's
issues.
It's easy to blame everyone else and push stuff off too. I see a tendency in people just period to do that too, is to blame everyone else for the things that are going wrong in their lives and refuse to see what they're contributing to those things. Now, it's not always everything's your fault, but obviously, and this is what I used to tell my son all the time, you can't control everything that happens to you, but you can control how you react to it. That's the only thing you can guarantee that you can control is how you react to these things. You can choose to look at it and be like, oh man, my life is horrible, and play a victim. You can choose to be like, I'm not going to be that way, right? You could grow up with an alcoholic father and you can make the decision, I'm going to also drink and be an alcoholic, or I'm not going to do that and I'm going to stay away from that shit.
Same thing with like abuse and things like
all of that stuff. Yeah. You can choose how you deal with those things. Like clearly the shit that I went through is nothing compared to you. But, right, like for both of us, we can choose to be like, man, life sucks. I've had to have these things happen and just fucking quit and give up. Or we can be like, you know what? I'm still just I'm going to live my life. I'm not going to let these things define me and move forward. And unfortunately, again, everyone deals with these things differently. So making the tools widely available and not looking down on people because they need help, I think we still have a long way as a society to go, because again, with social media, with the ability to poke fun at, make fun of, embarrass people for these things is.
How often is that done? I'm going to talk into the mic. How about that?
Yeah, that helps a little bit.
How often is that done within the news right now? Like, just
never.
With everybody. I'm
look,
just talking about saying somebody is crazy.
Great example. Britney Spears.
Yeah.
Back when she shaved her head, oh my God, Britney Spears lost her mind. Meanwhile, the paparazzi is following her and badgering her, right? And then what's happening now? She got out of her conservatorship, and if Britney Spears by any chance listens to this, I'm not saying anything bad about you at all, right? But this is
we're worried about you.
This is a perfect example. She's doing some stuff now, and everyone's like, oh my God, maybe she really was crazy. Maybe she didn't need to come out of conservatorship. Maybe she's losing her mind. And it could just be she's just being her. And it could be too, like, and I've seen this, again, we talked about it, people being trapped in a certain time period. As much as, I don't know if I like Dr. Phil, my wife's been really watching a lot of Dr. Phil, but he said something in an episode.
I put him in the Dr. Oz category.
He said something in an episode that totally resonated. And I was like, wow, that's a perfect example. And I think it explains sometimes those people that are locked into that age period or that time period. There was this crazy out of control mom, right? And her kids were like, we're the parents of our little brothers and sisters. Mom doesn't get out of bed. She lives like a slob. She just wants to go out and party. And she just has sex with all these random men, but doesn't raise us as her kids and all this stuff. And the way he broke it down was he was like, let's look at the timeline. She had this accident when she was 16. She got addicted to opioids because of the pain meds they gave her when she was 16, 17, 18. She got pregnant at 18, or maybe it was younger than that. Blah, 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 blah. He goes, she had this trauma, and she never developed mentally beyond it. She is a 16-year-old adult.
That's fairly
and she's
common.
Trapped, right? And I think that people fail to realize how impactful some events are, and it traps them in this mentality of when they were that age. And I think like that, I mean, with Britney Spears, that's what she talks about, how like I had all these things taken away from me. She's been putting it all on blast publicly.
Oh, you see it so commonly with child stars.
For sure. And that's a whole...
Well, I'm just saying she was certainly a child star,
and certainly was the money maker for her family, and like clearly, you could say what's the word I'm looking for? Taken advantage of, exploited, right? Like for sure, and that's one of those child star things. I'd be like, that sucks too. Like,
I mean, you have that.
Like if my kid came to me, I was like, I want to be an actor, and like, I want to do what you love, baby. But at the same time, like, I don't want you to become famous because, oh, shit. Like, it'd be cool. Yeah, dude, you can afford everything. Sweet. My kid's star. Can afford whatever she wants. Never have to know what it's like to struggle. But the other hand of it is all her shit's always going to be public. People are always going to be following her around. What's the mental health shit she's dealing with? Like, I don't know, man. That's a wild thing.
I think in general, just being famous is a stressful thing.
For sure.
How can you believe that anybody's your friend?
Well, yes. Oh, my Lord.
Like, how can you believe that anybody's not there to take advantage of you?
I think that comes with just being overly successful, period. Not even being a star or celebrity, but just anyone that achieves a certain level of success, you start to question. If I won the Mega Millions tomorrow, or Tuesday, whenever the next drawing is, right? If I won the Mega Millions and anybody I knew found out, you start to question everyone that comes into your life, everyone that starts reaching out to you. Because is it because they really are my friends and stuff, or is it because they're just hoping to get a hand? Like, that's...
I mean, and you look at the history of people that do that.
It's a sucky...
They get taken advantage of so bad.
Oh, all the time. I mean, they made a
they,
show about it. The lotto ruined my life.
Yeah. I mean, well, they tend to be taken advantage of by so many people.
It's wild. Now, the opposite side of some of this, when you were talking earlier about, like, kind of stepping on individual rights, right? Like, if I get this diagnosis, stuff with that. I've had personal experiences where the law is so worried about stepping on your rights that it leads them to inaction. So I've had two.
That's why I'm saying there's a happy medium.
There has to be.
That doesn't exist.
Because these are two real life experiences. I'm going to try to refrain from naming anyone or explaining the relationship.
Because I agree with you 1,000%.
I know one person there's two stories here, but the first one, this person I've grown up with, I've known them my entire life, their entire life. Always was searching for something. Habitual liar, right? Always was searching for something, for a reason, for a purpose, got really into religion and stuff. And again, I think it was just a way for them to feel better about themselves because of the crap that they would always do, right? Lied to everyone, used everyone, a lot of crap. Got into guns, had a couple different guns, had a pistol, loved to open carry for show. Like, this person told me one time that I was like, how was your weekend? Oh, it was a beautiful weekend, so I went down to the park and I just read my Bible with my gun on my hip, just open carry.
That's not scary to everyone.
And then a police officer walked up to me and was like,
in the middle of the park with a gun?
Yeah, what are you doing here? Oh, I'm just, lovely day, officer, just reading my Bible. And it was like, so that kind of...
That's an attention-seeking
It's an attention thing, right?
I wouldn't call that a dangerous event. It's an attention-seeking
So then they started dating someone. Yeah. And this person they were dating started getting worried because, and this was starting, I think, towards the beginning of the pandemic, like right at the beginning, started talking about how they were going to go to Detroit and shoot all the rapists and pedophiles, and like would leave and take their gun with them and be gone for all hours of the night. And this it's
a superhero complex of some
and this person was like, I'm afraid they're going to do something. I'm afraid they're either going to hurt themselves or they have or will hurt someone else because they keep talking about doing this. So that person stole the gun and brought it to me.
Oh, that's fun. Putting yourself right in the middle of it. I hate being the
responsible one. Yeah. Brought it to me. And I held on to it for a moment until they were like, yo, I'm going to show up with the police at your house. So I called the police and was like, look, this is the situation. Someone I know and I care about has access to a gun. Their significant other at the moment felt that they were going to hurt themselves or someone else and brought me the gun. What do I need to do with this? And they said, take it to the police station where they live. So that's exactly what I did. But they would do nothing further than that. That's it. That person could go and get their gun if they wanted to. Yeah. They told me if I had a CPL, I could have taken the gun myself, but I wouldn't have been able to transfer ownership or anything like that, right? Because it's registered to that person's name, et cetera, et cetera. And they were like, I mean, this sucks. This is like $1,000 pistol that we're just going to destroy if that person doesn't come and claim it. To which, like, they went to do a wellness check, but since they didn't open the door, and what was wild is, like, we were watching on the security camera, and the first thing they did is go look for their gun. When they looked out the peephole and saw the police were there, the first thing they did was go look for their gun. So it's like, what were you going to do? But
it's a great warning sign.
But there's a lot of mental health issues going on, right? But there was nothing else they would do. nothing at all. And to the point that that person went out, or at least presented that they did, was sending me text messages like, you didn't stop shit. I just went and got a new gun. Better watch your back. And like, it was frustrating to feel kind of helpless because they were like, oh, there's nothing going to do. There's nothing we can do. We can't put him in a hospital. That would violate his personal rights. We can't just lock him up for no reason. To get any family member to be able to say like, hey, we need to have this person committed because clearly they're having a mental health episode and need to get some kind of help and are potentially a danger to themselves and to the public. You got to go through a lengthy court process. Like, it's not a, hey, there's an issue right here, we need to take care of it. You can't just simply do that. The other instance was same kind of thing, but way the fuck crazier. This person drove their car through their parents' garage door, busted the door down with a sledgehammer, beat their dad with a sledgehammer, beat up their mom, and tried to burn the house down. When the cops got there, he went to a mental health facility, but he only had to be held for like 72 hours or whatever. After that, it's voluntary. And you would have to go through the court systems again to try to get kind of like power of attorney sort of thing, where like basic guardianship or some nonsense, where you would have to provide all these things to be able to get them committed. They're not committed. This person is still just running the streets. They got an ankle bracelet on, but they're still just running the streets. Could do anything at any time. And it's really scary to know that, yes, I get not infringing people's personal rights, but this feels like, to a degree of, we don't want to infringe someone's personal rights that other people are potentially going to die. And it gets really weird being in both of these different situations where I get not wanting to infringe a personal right, but at which point do we put the person over the rest of society, over other people's lives? And it's a really fine line.
An actual review process would.
But it was wild to the point that this person can be texting a hit list and physically driving their car through a garage door, beating people with weapons, and they can go to jail for X amount of days, be out on bail, and run in the streets again. Now, granted, they have an ankle bracelet on, right? So a GPS location. That doesn't always stop people.
Well, I mean, this is one of those reasons why, sadly, you constantly are watching the news and something bad happens, and they're like, this is a person who's well known to the police. How often is it somebody we never thought about or anything like that?
And that's like the hard part, though. Yeah. Like, is where do you take away someone's personal rights? Hey, we need to stick you in a place till you can definitely be better. Like, I mean, this person was like hearing voices and shit. Like, it was bad, and there was nothing they could do. Like, they coerced him at one point to go check into a facility, but a lot of those places, you can't hold them. You can check yourself out. As soon as you're like, I'm out. And that's what's crazy.
I mean, the same thing with, drug treatment facilities.
Right. All of that, yeah. Like, you can voluntarily, like, it has to be super crazy circumstances for them to be like, no, you can't.
I mean, the only time someone would stay there is if they wanted to get better. But if you're truly having an episode, then you don't feel like you need to get better.
Right. And it's that's the part that frustrates me a lot, is because you can see these people are clear and present danger sometimes, right? You can see those clear warning signs, but because we're afraid of stepping on rights, we won't do anything. But then when something does happen because we didn't do anything, now we're going to overreact and do a whole bunch of crap, or propose to do a whole bunch of crap that limits everyone's rights. Yeah. And it's a weird place to find ourselves and to have to navigate, where we can prevent overstepping someone, but prevent putting everyone else in danger. Like,
so we do neither.
Right, and then we end up doing neither.
That's why I was kind of discussing, like, a happy middle ground, like somewhere where you can bring in professionals, you can bring in review, you can bring in judges, you can have things done, but when you don't do anything, it solves the exact same amount.
And it's weird to me.
It solves nothing.
It doesn't. And I think, and I don't want to be a pessimist, but I feel like it's hard or maybe going to be impossible to find that middle ground. I'll give you another example. And the reason why
in the current political environment, probably.
So this is new to Michigan this year. You have to mandatory report your deer harvest. Okay. Other states have been doing this for years, some for decades. You have to report your deer. Okay. So you have 72 hours from the time that you harvest the deer that you have to report it.
You just provide your deer tag number.
Whatever the number is. I haven't gotten a deer yet this season, so I don't know the whole process. But you just, from what I've read, it's like 2 minutes. Fill out these questions. What general area did you get it? What time? What was the sex? Like all the things that you would normally do on the tag, the month that you got it, the day that you got it of that month, and then if it was male or female.
So
right?
what's the argument on this?
The argument is, this is just another way for them to track us. This is people just taking more of our data. It's the DNR being lazy and making us do their work. I'm not getting a paycheck to do this, and and it's really, really weird to see. It was funny. I was reading one today where someone was bitching about this at length on this internet post, and the majority of the comments were, "It took you longer to write this than probably to fill out that survey. Why are you bitching? Just don't hunt." Other states have been doing this for a long time. And there's plenty of like out west, like trophy states where you can get like elk, and like they're known for their big trophy deer and stuff like that, mule deer, whitetail, all that, where they've had this kind of stuff in process for forever. Hopefully that cushion's helping.
Yeah, my ass was hurting quite a bit.
After about like an hour, that cushion is useless. Yeah, but it was better than nothing.
I did a little adjustment.
Yeah, but that's the mentality, right? Like, that we're dealing with, and it probably is, to a degree, the political climate, right? But I just feel like there's always that kind of group that just wants to naysay everything. And it's like, really, is it that big of a deal that I have to either call in or go on a website or use an app to just say, hey, I got a deer, this is where, this is what kind of deer.
I can see the connection to an artificial registration where they're going to try to make that. But it's one of the...
I mean, the idea is to get a better
rifles. Like
the idea is to get a better idea of the number harvested versus the number population.
I'm just kind of connecting the dots between the paranoia.
But that I mean, maybe this is a stretch, but that's my fear.
And it has to do exactly with the political climate.
And that's what my fear is with trying to find that middle ground. Is you're always going to have those voices that are going to be as loud as possible, that are against any of that middle ground.
Yeah, but isn't that work on all sides?
Yeah. Oh no, it does. You're going to have the people that are for it really loud too.
Yeah, it makes no difference.
I don't know. I can tell you this. I feel like where I live right now, that if I said that I was for one political opponent over the other, I can definitely tell you that I feel like I'd receive backlash where I live.
Oh, if you put a sign out front?
If I put a Biden sign out, well, I mean, my street is very private, so no one's going to know where I live. But like, if I drove around with a Biden flag on my car or something, like everyone does here, I mean, there's trucks that fly all these flags and shit everywhere. It's hilarious.
I can guarantee it, yeah.
That my car might get keyed, some crazy stuff like that. And it's funny because we're always...
Whereas where I live, it'd be the opposite.
The opposite.
100% the opposite.
I mean, I would never vandalize someone's property, but it does feel like there's those extreme cases of... I mean, it's weird. Man, have you seen the stickers? And it's just... And this, again, goes to a mental health...
Tell me what the sticker is.
Yes, I'm going to tell you the sticker. But I think this, again, goes to like a weird mental health place, right? People needing a purpose... people just looking for common ground, like a collective, I need to feel like I'm in a tribe. Have you seen people driving around with a sticker of Trump in their window so it looks like he's in the car with them?
I think I've seen something on the internet, but I've never seen it.
I've seen that in person.
I've never seen it.
I've seen that in person on multiple cars. It's the wildest thing.
I imagine if I went over some of the, the western, middle western states, I'd probably run into it a lot.
It's just a wild thing.
I mean, living where I live, Oakland County is a definite.
Yeah. What's interesting though with that, right? Regardless of what your political leaning is to the point that people are idolizing certain people is wild. I mean, obviously we can say that with Trump, right? Like there's a clear idolization. Well, I think
there's a little bit of both, and it's become the signal calling because there's such
it's definitely
an obsession.
A single thing, yeah,
like
for sure.
But think the Democrats are, and I don't even want to get into a political thing, but I think they're as much or more at fault for creating that because they're so obsessed with this person who is no longer our president that that's the only thing you talk about. Like, it's the only thing that you discuss. It's the only thing that you care about. And you're just like, the world's going on. Like, this guy is no longer here. Like, I don't need...
But I think the fear of that is that...
all this stuff.
I think the fear of that is clearly signaling that he's going to try to run again, and that's where the fear is. But from a mental health standpoint, because I'm always interested in, like, how people think... how they get into these different ideologies. And it's the same thing, both sides, right? How they can idolize certain leaders. Like, it's really weird when you see someone that is gung-ho about one political person or the other, but they don't vote. They don't even participate in it.
All the time,
and but it's wild. And again, it's that tribalism, that like belonging to a group thing. And is that I don't want to say it's a mental health issue, but is that leading to or lending to some of the mental health stuff that we see because of that? I don't belong to a group and maybe there's something wrong with me, and then it could lead someone to spiral, or the bullying. Oh, if I say that I'm something different, I'm going to get bullied. And let's so Justin, and the reason before in previous episodes and in just in personal conversation, you've always been a big advocate for mental health and mental health awareness, treatments, and just bringing more attention to it. And you had told me before about how you had dealt with mental health issues personally because of the things that you've gone through in your life.
Yep.
And I want to give you that time to
I can
tell
give
us
a little,
about that.
Little background with the issues I have, and one of the reasons why I am very much behind it. So, throughout my life, I have had a lot of illness, and looking back on it now, I think I had a tendency towards depression, different things like that as a younger kid, in and out. You know, like you have cycles of depression. You're just not depressed and then constantly depressed all the time. So you can have ups and downs. Completely went untreated, of course, because that's just the way people do stuff,
right?
Especially in the 80s.
Oh, yeah. Toughen up. Man up.
Just man up and call it a day. But in 2010, I had a completely interesting and somewhat rough year. So I had just gotten married and was probably about, 7-8 months into my marriage. I was working a job that I had for 16 years. Everything's just kind of just going along like clockwork, like you plan,
right?
You know, with your life. I'm 36 years old.
Playing the game of life, right?
Yeah, just puttering along and doing what I do. I went into work one day, and things were a little quirky. Things didn't seem right. I got a meeting request for the next day around like 10 a.m., and I called some of the other people with the same role that I did, and they all had the same meeting request at the same time, and there was a smell in the air of possible layoffs, and I was just like, well, this is probably it. So,
right.
Had that job for 16 years, and obviously that's one of those things where you consistently have, I don't know, you don't really plan for doing another job when you have this job that you do from 20 years old.
For so long. You have that longevity there,
20
right? You're like, oh, this is what I'm going to do.
36. Like,
right.
I'm going to retire from this job. No big deal.
Nope.
So I kind of packed up my stuff in anticipation, put all the things in the car, and then came in the next day and got called in. Said, hey, thanks for the work, but enjoy the rest of your life.
And just like that, done.
That's
I
about
mean, at
it.
least you were right.
I mean, then the security people were going to lead me out after 16 years, and at least the head of that area was just like, don't fucking do that. Like, you don't need to make it like that. And he's just like, whatever you need, just let me know. So
isn't it always weird when they do that, right? I mean, I get why they do that, because you never know.
I guess you never know.
But
like,
it feels like a walk of shame.
It is. It's punishment, almost, for something that you have nothing to do with. I went home, and I started making a resume for the first time in really almost ever. And I had gotten this job at 21 years old, 20 years old, one of the two. But I was like, I'm going to get a job. I got to get things together and everything else. Well, just regular old things. I had gone to the doctor the week prior. This was a Wednesday. I think I went to the doctor on a Friday and had gotten my normal tests done. They had gone in the backside and done the fun scope that you get to do.
Oh,
and
those are a ton of fun, especially when you have to get them done before the age at which you're expecting to get them done. I've had to have 2 now. That's no fun.
It's pretty routine now, but
I bet.
As a bit of a background, the reason I was getting them at 36 is I've had Crohn's disease since I was 14.
Okay, so you had Crohn's.
And so they usually were keeping an eye on things to see how things had progressed. And so the doctor gave me a call the actual day, not the next day, the day after the next day. So 2 days later, I get a call and they're like, hey, can you come in for your test results? And I found that kind of odd.
You know when you get a call saying, hey, can you come in for your test results? The test results were probably not the best. Because when they are, they're like, oh, you're all good.
Terrible thing that doctors do. And this is something that doctors should focus on in the entire world to kind of go off kilter a little bit is when they should tell you to bring somebody. Like bring a friend or family member maybe with your doctor to your doctor's appointment. Oh no, we don't want to do that, even though it's obvious that something was awry.
If you're gonna say something that's gonna impact someone emotionally, like oh shit, you probably want to have some support there.
No one does that. No doctor does that. Not one that I know of, and I've never heard of it in anybody's experience, which is garbage. It's an absolute garbage thing to do.
I'm going to lay some heavy shit on you and expect you to be mentally well enough to drive home, to operate a large vehicle, navigate traffic. Jeez.
I come into the doctor's office not really knowing what to expect, and they pull me into another room. And I don't know if anybody's ever seen the movie 50-50.
Is that the one with Seth Rogen and... Where he gets cancer?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And
I watched it one time. Can't ever watch it again because it basically
too close to home.
It's way too close to home. Took me a while to recover just from watching it. However, I will give them credit for getting it down pretty damn good. Like it is an amazing interpretation and
Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Seth Rogen are the 2 I remember from that. Yeah.
It is. It's very much like real life, and I believe it is a 100% true story, and they had the person involved in that filming. So I pulled into a room and basically told, guess what? You have colon cancer, and we're going to have to operate within a week. It's fairly progressed. At that point, everything around me kind of, I just got kind of tunnel vision. And everything else he said, I have really no idea. Kind of sounded like the Charlie Brown teacher.
Wah, 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 wah.
Like everything kind of shuts down because you're basically told, like, hey, guess what? You're probably going to die.
Yeah.
And I don't really know what happened after that point. I went in and I do remember asking the doctor because I was like, well, what should I do for this surgery? Because I don't really know. And he's like, well, you're gonna have to pick a surgeon. And one of the good things that I did at that point was I said, if I was telling you this exact same news right now, who would you call? And he gave me a name, and the guy was brilliant. And so that was probably the best question I asked under the situation with what I could muster together.
So kind of failed on the, hey, bring some support with you, but did a good one on referencing someone for you to talk to.
At least helped me out there. But then it's just like, okay, head out. And after getting that news, I was expected to go out to the front lobby and pay my copay and move on with my life like it's a normal fucking thing. And I tried my fucking damnedest. I remember walking out. It's like a hum in your ear, like you had just been to a really loud concert.
Like the
yeah,
just kind of,
everything in your body telling you to shut down immediately. And going out there, and everybody in the office, they don't know what I was just told. They don't have a thing. But very matter of fact, like, hey, $10 copay, and I'm like, okay, and I pay the thing and head out, get into the elevator, head downstairs, made it into my car, sat down, and broke the fuck down.
I can imagine.
Like, I completely lost it at that point. And I remember I got on the phone, and I'm driving home crying so hard that I can't even see. And this is why it's kind of fucking irresponsible to do that.
No, I agree.
And I'm on the phone in a sheer panic trying to talk to my wife at the time, trying to go, what am I supposed to do? Like, what's going on? I'm trying to do this. I'm losing my shit. Like, I just remember going home and not knowing what to do. I made it home safely somehow. I mean,
that's a really, really interesting perspective because, like, I think everyone's thought about, or most people, right, at some point have thought about, what if I got that horrible news? How would I react? And I don't think that part ever gets talked about. Like, the bedside manner, if you will, of doctors and how they break that to you and making sure that you have some kind of support there with you.
They don't want to tell you the results beforehand, but warn people. That's tell them.
That's wild.
Like, can you bring a loved one with you? Like, it's okay. I know something's up. Otherwise, you wouldn't.
You wouldn't be saying, "Hey, come in." So we can discuss.
You would have gave me my results over the phone like every other fucking year, like every other time.
That's wild, and I wonder. I mean, like,
it
doesn't feel like that's a huge change to medical practices or anything. That's just like a common decency thing. You know what? We need you to come in and discuss these results. Bring someone with you.
And now I feel like I'm victim blaming myself.
Not at all, but I think
situation
that's something that doesn't get looked at.
But I mean, after the words, I was just like, I should have had you go with me. Like, but I didn't want you to take a day off of work or something to come with me.
But like you're talking about the mental and in a way physical impact that they can have on you, like physiologically. I can't even say that word right now. Physiologically, right? That impact of breaking down. Anyone that's ever had a really big emotional response to something knows how hard that can be, and to be faced with, like you said,
I didn't kill myself or somebody else on the way home, kind of impressive. I never would have thought of that perspective. Irresponsible at the same time. Like, I probably shouldn't have drove it. Nowadays I would have called an Uber or some shit,
right,
and just made the guy feel terrible and cried in the back seat. Fuck it, but
It's a fucking wild Uber ride. I just picked this guy up and he is fucking losing his shit in the backseat, just crying for no reason.
Like, I can't imagine how much trauma you're putting on the poor Uber driver.
Right.
Like, poor guy. But, or lady, either or. But, it's just one of those things.
Note to any doctors out there.
Yeah,
if you gotta have that hard talk,
Like, I don't know
maybe
what the
time
rules
to bring
are,
right.
but maybe it's time to reanalyze.
As not your doctor, bring someone with you off the record.
It's just a completely frustrating situation. And, well, that started a absolutely fantastic journey of within 2 weeks, I was having my intestines torn apart and resectioned.
So did they just remove the section that was
They
affected?
removed all my large intestines and resectioned my intestine, a very small section, like 4 inches, that they had kept of the large intestine to what was remaining of my rectum. So most of the time, when you get that surgery, you get a colostomy, and then they do a reversals every time. My doctor was extraordinary. He's since retired, but he was a pioneer at the time, and did a surgery that no one else would do.
Okay,
like he did that reconnection at the time. Didn't go so well.
Oh no!
So
before you get into that, did you like? Obviously, you were going for these tests because you knew that with Crohn's disease, and I'm assuming without knowing much, there's a higher chance of having these things happen if you suffer from Crohn's disease.
Yes.
So then, how mentally prepared were you for just besides when you got the call of, hey, we need you to come in and discuss your results, of just going and getting the procedures done, anticipating that could, like, how well prepared do you feel like you were for this eventuality? Or was it one of those, it probably won't happen to me?
I think that's a really hard thing to consider, because I actually, it can be in another talk, had a lot of issues with acting out and depression as a young kid in high school. I didn't know I had depression at the time, but acting out and doing the stupidest shit because I had a complex of going out in a blaze of glory.
Well, like you said, that's what you were saying earlier, yeah.
Yeah, just because I had always been sick and always thought that I probably wouldn't live that long. Now, I thought I was kind of prepared for that, but I had gotten over that. I had come to terms.
So by this point in your life,
like at this point in my life, I'm just like, hey, like
maybe things will be okay.
That was a childish way to think. Like,
right.
I'm gonna be just fine. I probably would have been more prepared if I was in my early 20s than in my mid 30s.
Where you had kind of gotten past that life expectancy you had thought you were going to hit.
I thought, like mid 20s capping, just the way that lots of stuff had always kind of given me sort of odd traumatic experiences since that. I remember being diagnosed with the Crohn's disease. One of the things that's so weird nowadays, it is on the television like every 7th commercial. I feel like somebody's talking about it, and maybe I pay more attention, but there's so many different drugs for it, and it's out there. But
that's just the AI knowing what you went through and just feeding this shit to you.
It wasn't really a thing that was discussed or chatted about when I was young. So
I've only known one other person that I've crossed paths with that's disclosed, hey, I have Crohn's disease. That's it. Besides you. So you make number 2.
I was diagnosed in the 80s. Probably like 87-ish, 88, somewhere in there. I'd never heard of it before. I went in, they said, hey, you got this, blah, 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 blah. And I went home.
And for anyone that doesn't know, what is Crohn's disease?
Crohn's disease is, in the most the most basic explanation, is an immune system disorder. So much like people who get heart transplants or liver transplants or whatever it may be, and they say that their body rejected it and it went in and killed it, and then it's like a failed transplant. It is an issue with your brain and basically your lymphatic system and everything else where that thinks that your intestines are an implant and tries to kill them daily.
Really?
So it's automatically goes in and attacks them. So they're ulcerated and damaged, and it's a problem. So one of the things that they tend to do, in those early days before all the different biologics that they have now, they have a lot better treatment than I grew up with.
Right.
They would basically give you tons of steroids to try to shut down your immune system. So I get horrific illnesses all the time because I had no immune system.
Right.
But I remember them providing the diagnosis. Never heard of this thing before. Go home, turn on the TV, and in the most fucked up way,
there's a Crohn's
disease commercial.
What are the fucking
with a skull and crossbones on it about how people are dying and this and that, and it's the most horrific disease known to man. Like I can't even explain the timing of it. Like I was like, what the fuck? Like never heard of this in my life, and now you're just like, oh, what can we do? Basically Sally Struthers and some sad puppies just talking about fucking
sad puppies.
Like everybody dying from Crohn's disease.
I got in the arms of the angel playing in the arms.
And I'm just like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, really? Like, this is my introduction? So,
wow, that's rough.
So I remember that being like a weird traumatic, and I think that triggered me being an absolute, not that make excuses, but me being an asshole young kid.
I can see that. You're not the first person.
I'm gonna die anyways, so I have to do something cool. But
or just not even do something cool, but just kind of like a lack of it doesn't fucking matter now.
Yeah.
Like, I've only got so much time. Like
slacking. Like I totally screwed off in high school and did a lot of stuff because I was just like, well,
what's the fucking matter? Right.
Like, what's the point? I need to have some fun. I need to do some things. So
I've talked to other people that have said the same thing about different situations, clearly different situations, but where they had that same kind of mentality where they're like, well, this is an eventuality, so fuck it. What's it matter?
Yeah. So I'm just going to goof off.
I know someone that thought they were going to get deported, so they just ran up their fucking credit cards because they're like, I'm out of this country anyway.
And I've always kind of I've gotten better in my old age, but for a long time I had a not too concerned about tomorrow mentality about money and things that I did and things that I completed and things that I put effort in. Like, so lots of issues with thinking about tomorrow. So
you get to the point
so
right
now
where
I'm going right back to my 30s. I'm now to the point where I was just like, oh, I'm going to be just fun. Like I have a kid. Like I have all these things going on. I had my son. I had all this stuff, and now I'm just legs taken out from underneath me.
So the two things kind of happen concurrently, right? You lost your job.
I lost my job,
which on its own, especially if you've been somewhere for 16 years. That can be super traumatic, right? And especially like if you grew up with a mentality of like man up and the man is the provider I dealt with that myself, to go from if you were the breadwinner to like all of a sudden now like I'm what use am I don't have a job. We have these, like you said, you have a wife, you have a child, like you've got all these responsibilities, and now you have to figure out how to get a new job. You got to jump into that rat race again that everyone doesn't want to do. It sucks. And then on top of that, hey, you've got colon cancer.
I literally was applying for jobs that afternoon after I got laid off. Like it's just like I need to take care of this
right. Well, because you have to. Yeah. I mean, there's like
I have responsibilities. Like I need to get this done.
So then on top of that, then this happens as well.
Then I get a cancer diagnosis.
And basically, you said most of your large intestine removed, right?
All of it except for about 4 inches.
Okay.
And so that's 10, 12 feet. So then I start fighting. So I'm going through chemotherapy.
Okay.
Now,
when they remove the intestines,
that, something worse happens. And so prior to me starting the chemotherapy, I actually went in.
I'm not laughing. I have to keep reminding Justin to talk into the microphone.
It's all right. But
so prior to the chemo.
Prior to the chemo, you have to heal up from your surgery.
Okay. Well, that makes sense, right? Weaken immune system.
Obviously, they can't put you in there while you're in pieces.
They might as well just kill you at that point if they're doing that, right?
So, irresponsible Justin just thinks he's going to fight his way through everything. And I was not doing well. Doing well. Like, I had horrible fevers, could barely walk. I'm damn near crippled. I remember the one thing I wanted to do more than anything was go to my son's 5th grade graduation. I had set a goal. I was like, I'm going to go to this fucking graduation. I'm going to take care of it because if I die, I'm gonna have done this. So I go there and I'm literally dying at the graduation. I feel so bad for the school. I still feel bad for them because they must have felt so guilty. This kid's dad's dying in the crowd. I was sheet white. I'm on the verge of death. And didn't know it from infection. So I'm just going, I got it.
I'm just trying to tough through it.
So I'm just trying to tough through it. Like, this must be like the normal process. And I made it through. I'm walking with a cane. I looked like I was probably 100 years old. And, the teachers and things are bringing me water. They bring out a comfy chair. They bring out all this stuff. Like, they're just like, oh, my God, like, this kid's dad's dying. Well, I'm not. I'm outside this situation, so I don't know how I look. I think about it now like I literally was on the brink of death. So I think it was the next day, everybody just kept telling me, like, you need to go to ER. You need to go to ER. I'm like, I'm healing up.
You look like you're dying, dude. Go to ER.
And they're just like, no, you really look like you're dying. So they took me to the emergency room. And I went in there and they looked at me for 1 second.
Like, they were like, what the fuck?
And they're just like, this is not good. We're going to do an x-ray of you. So they do an x-ray of my chest while I'm in ER. And they find a softball-sized abscess in my chest because my intestines, where they put them together, were leaking into my chest.
Oh, no.
So if that abscess blows, I'm dead. No ifs, ands, or buts. Like, there's no way to fix it. Like,
so, if your intestines are leaking into your body, that's
what
essentially like fecal matter and stuff, right?
Yes.
It's kind of in your body, so that's not good.
In a big ball. So, luckily, I would have already been dead, but my body walled it off because it was growing. So, depending on how I moved or whatever, like, it could burst at any moment. So, the doctor literally pulls my family aside without me there, and they're just like, make sure you say your goodbyes because I don't know if he'll survive
if
this.
He's gonna, wow.
So,
meanwhile, they're telling you everything's gonna
be
okay.
And they're just like, we're just gonna put you in surgery. But I found out later, like, they were just
your parents were like, they told you you're gonna fucking die.
Yep, and they're just like, make sure that you give him a hug and do whatever, because the ER doctor came back in, like, literally completely changed after he saw it and was just like, we're putting you into surgery. And I go, when? He goes, now. And I was like, okay, I guess that's cool. And they were so scared that they started the surgery while I was awake.
Because they were afraid of it just bursting in at a moment.
Yep, like at any second. So they put the stuff in, and I remember watching on the screen, they put me in this tube where they could watch the surgery, and they were putting an aeration needle through my chest. And I watched it, and I could see
it in the
video feed, this needle going into my chest towards the giant ball. And that's when I fell asleep. And,
what a weird last fucking image to see. Like,
yep, that's when
that's going into my body.
Yep, but I was screaming at the top of my lungs, like, I'm still awake. I'm still awake. I don't think I could feel it, but I was certainly fucking scared.
And mentally, I mean, yeah, that'd be scary.
So I had a home nurse then for the next couple of months. I had to do almost 24 hours a day IVs that I just sat in a chair. I lived in a recliner.
So now the surgery with the intestines to your colon and all that.
I had a drainage bag that hung off the front of me.
Now, what led to the abscess? Was that any fault of the doctors? Was it just
bad luck?
Just bad luck. Okay.
Yeah, just bad luck because it happens.
The healing just didn't take.
Yeah, just the healing didn't take, and it was a tiny little thing that just luckily just kept growing because I was trying to tough it out, and I went way too long. So it just got huge. I mean, if I would have just complained about it earlier.
Been like, hey, something feels off.
Yeah, probably wouldn't have been life-threatening.
So bad.
But, so I spent several weeks recovering from that and got to a point where they could do the chemotherapy. So they're doing the chemotherapy, and I quite honestly lost my mind from the chemotherapy. Like, chemotherapy makes it so I don't know if this does it to everybody. To me, doing the chemotherapy, I never knew where I was at. I was constantly confused. I had no short-term memory. I carried a little pad in my front pocket to tell me where I was and where I was going. Because one time, just as an example, I went to Myers, and I don't even know to this day what for. I just decided, like, I was going to go to Myers and go get something. I was there for several hours. And then I got a phone call, like, where are you and what are you doing? I'm like, I'm at Myers. And they're like, why? I don't really remember. I didn't realize I was there for several hours. Like, I was just like a crazy old man with Alzheimer's because I couldn't remember anything. The only stuff I could remember was like more than 10 years ago. So I'm trying to do stuff and completely mentally incapacitated. So I would just like see things that weren't there. Like, I was just kind of out of it.
Now, when you did chemo, so I delivered to part of Beaumont to a chemotherapy building, and my experience was kind of stereotypical to what I've seen in movies. So I don't know how it was for you back then, but it was literally like almost like a long rectangular room with just people set up on like couches, like nice chairs, recliners almost, with like a TV nearby or like someone sitting with them, and then the drip just going. That's essentially how it was for you. But it was really weird though, because it was so
sombering.
Yeah, that was the word that was on the tip of my tongue. But it was depressing. And
it is.
And it was
in a room full of people dying.
Yeah. And I can't believe that they don't do anything to try to like maybe spruce that up a little bit.
Well, actually, I will give credit where credit is due. I went to Carmano's out in Farmington Hills.
Okay.
And
Carmano's is like what? Carmano's Cancer Institute, right? Yeah.
And they had kind of sectioned off areas where you couldn't really see everybody. You had a little bit of privacy, and it looked out over a garden, so they made it kind of nice.
This was Royal Oak, and it was just like one long big room with multiple stations, but people weren't.
That's why I was
delivering a fucking refrigerator to this floor.
I chose to go somewhere
that was going to give you more. That was going to give
me a little more attention.
Okay. Not that the hospital wasn't giving attention or anything like that. It was just
it was a smart move.
It seems so much like it was. You see it in movies, like when they portray someone getting chemo or something like that, and you're like, "Yeah, it can't be really what it was."
100% what it is.
It was, and
that's the way it is almost everywhere. It's a depressing, shitty thing.
It was it was so quiet. It was like just so depressing. Those
areas because I have had to get some infusions for other things, and I've been there when people were getting cancer infusions, and it's just fucking depressing and shitty.
It was a very unsettling experience, and I mean, just being there, and I was just like I said, delivering an appliance.
No, it should be. I mean, it should be not a great experience. I don't want to say a great experience, but at least make it a friendly experience.
Yeah, it felt really cold.
Yeah,
really cold and just sterile. I mean, I get sterile because
like
it has
you don't want
to
be like this mechanical method. If I had a way to change a lot of stuff, I certainly would. But sometimes I'm lucky that my insurance would let me go somewhere specialized. So I think it's, I'm sure they do the same kind of thing at many specialized cancer places like Mayo Clinic and things like that. But I'd say probably the majority of people are stuck in just kind of the clinical thing, whatever that happens to be paid for, especially if you're on like something like Medicare or government insurance or something like that.
Yep.
But,
so you got the chemo.
So I have the chemo. I'm going through that, and I'm slowly losing my shit.
Right. Old man walking around the grocery store.
Because I will say, like, mentally, it was just not there. It felt like it was just attacking my brain, and it was so frustrating. Because I couldn't focus watching TV. I couldn't do anything. So I'm just not mentally all there, and it's really upsetting. Especially when you can't remember anything, like like to go 10 times to the kitchen to go get something because you can't remember the first 9 times why the hell you went. Like, it's just this.
Like walk in, you're like, what? Go back. Wait, no, I wanted something.
Yep.
Yeah, I can see how that would be.
And I remember, my wife at the time, my newer wife, less than a year, was.
So not only did you go through all this stuff, you got a divorce too.
Well, hold on. We're not there
yet.
No,
we're not there yet. Well, we're at new wife, so I figured we were.
No, well, I'm just saying at the time, because I had only been married, like, I don't even, 8-9 months
Gotcha.
or something.
So this is.
Like, we got married, and it was for better or worse, but no one says, worse is going to come in like 5 months, 6 months.
Yeah.
So...
In the words of Michael J. Fox,
the same thing didn't go very well. She was supporting, but I lost. I think I just, I wasn't the person that she married at the time, and I don't think that she was prepared for it. I'm not really defending her, but I'm not putting all the blame on her either. But
you don't think that, right? Like when
she found solace in somebody at work. So
I think that's unfortunately that's
fairly
pretty common.
Yeah,
right.
That's what the doctors would say at the cancer center. So she found solace in somebody at work, which honestly that frustrated me because that's the most predatory fucking thing you could possibly imagine. So
yeah, that's pretty fucked up.
That's pretty fucked up.
Like as a person.
Yeah.
If I knew that someone was dealing with that, there's no part of me that's like, that's my in. I'm swooping in.
Yep.
All right, I got this. Like,
it's nauseating. But anyways, like, I don't even want to think about that too much. But let's say as soon as I found out that marriage was over.
Right.
So I'm alone and going through this, no job, cancer, alone,
chemo,
trying to raise a kid, chemotherapy, brain not working right.
It's a lot.
So I'm trying to focus. So what do I do to focus? I'm going to start working on this rental house that I'm in. I'm going to paint. I'm going to do some things because literally after the person moved out, I had left for the weekend, and when I came back, pretty much most everything was gone. It literally was like a television show where there's spots on the wall where shit
where
used
like
to
that
be.
Where it used to be,
where something was, because the
right,
dust,
the
or
dust
whatever.
and the dirt and
And
stuff.
I was
Yeah,
just like, oh my god, like this is so depressing. So what am I gonna do? I'm gonna paint. I'm gonna make it mine. I'm gonna do what I can do for the cheapest price possible.
and I mean, and essentially,
and
it's
I
a kind of
started
therapy,
selling
right?
all my belongings on eBay to try to get some money, because disability was giving me like $400, and so I'm using it as mental therapy to try to strengthen my head. But I'm still going through all this, and well, the landlord, the champ that he is, comes by and sees everything I've done to the house, and decides to sell the house because now it's worth more. Because I fixed it up.
When you said the champ that he is, I was like, I sensed the sarcasm, but I was hoping not.
Like, decided now is the time to
Like,
sell.
oh, thanks, man. You made this house so much better. Let me sell it.
Because it's all freshly painted and redone and all these other things. Because I just am spending my own money to fix his house up just to make myself feel better. So he puts it up for sale. How am I going to get a new place for my son and I?
With no job.
I have no job. No money.
On disability, right?
Like, I'm sick. Like, I got nothing. Nothing at all. And that's exactly the way I felt with chemo brain. Like, what am I providing my son? Like, am I a benefit to him? So I start thinking that I'm not. Like, I'm not doing my job as a father. So I start thinking to myself, if I want to help my son, I have life insurance.
Yeah, that's.
I could leave him enough to go to college. I could do all that stuff. Like, this seems like a completely logical answer. Like, if I die, he's best off.
At this point, did old Justin come back at all? I'm not going to last long. This is probably not going to work. I mean, it sounds like you're approaching that with those things, but
I'm thinking, if I get better, what have I got?
So not even a when I get better, but just a if I make it through this.
If I get better, how am I going to dig out of this hole? And how am I going to provide for my family? So, if I was to kill myself, like, that's not going to pay out. So I'm going to pull out of all the medicine. I'm going to stop doing the chemo. I'm going to stop doing everything. I'm going to die from cancer.
Just let nature run its course, essentially.
Just let nature run its course. And I kind of made my mind up. Like, so not necessarily, I mean, granted, it's not the greatest move, but I wasn't, like, my brain was so affected by that. Like, I'm trying to think logically, but I mean, that's not the decision I would make right now.
But to you, that was the logical decision.
It was the logical choice. Like, otherwise, I'm failing as a father. Like, I'm not doing my job.
How common do you think that is for
I
people?
Think it's really common.
Just and not even facing as extreme a conditions as you, right? But when we look at it from a mental health perspective of, like, it's really easy to snowball, right? Where this is going wrong, but that's also wrong, and that's also not where I want to be, and this isn't, and now I suck. I'm not a success, and
I'm failing everybody else, because I think when you get down into a hole, I don't know, there's two ways you can look at it. You can be really, really selfish, but I think the people that are really selfish about stuff, and I'm not saying anything bad about anybody, but I think they tend to blame everybody else and don't take those actions. Like, they're just like, oh, it's everybody else's fault, so I'll wait for them to fix it for me. And I'm not bad-mouthing anybody.
Well, this is where it's saying, like, everything is your fault. It's almost the opposite.
But this is just like, you're taking all the blame onto yourself, and you're like, I'm failing. And I think sometimes when you do that, when you you're just like, I'm 100% at fault for this, and there's no way I can fix it. So how can I fix it? How can I cause a solution to this problem? So we'll do this. This is genius. What a great plan. Well, luckily they have, so I basically threw this out there, and I was just like, hey, man, I'm done. Like, oh, it's all cool. Like, all cool. And I will say, like, one of the awesomest things about Carmanos is for people there, because things that just aren't there are, they have a wonderful service where they just provide mental health like therapy to the patients.
I mean,
like if,
you
all you got to do
like
is just walk
be,
in.
right?
You just walk into the room, and I was talking to this wonderful lady there, and she's just like, I want to talk to you about this decision. Like, obviously, we can't force you to do anything, but
right.
Here's the why behind it. Like, I want to explain the why. Like, I'm not going to say that this is stupid or anything else, but here's the why you're thinking that. And here's what we can do, because you have a chemical imbalance right now in your brain. Like, I'm going to send you to this doctor, and we'll supplement it with this, and we'll get these things in line. Like, somebody reached out to me at the right time and told me, like, hey, this isn't as good of a plan as you think it is. And, you know what? The craziest thing, like, I was just like, okay, well, I'm going to give it a try. Give it a try. And, like, a month and a half later, not even, like, 6 weeks, they're just like, hey, we're not seeing anything. We're going to pull you off chemotherapy. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. Like, all of a sudden and I'm not saying that these are interconnected at all, but all of a sudden I was better, and now I have a mission. How am I going to fix this? Like, that's because the other plan's not going to work. Like, how am I going to fix this? So I started doing everything I could to get my brain in a line, because I was just like, I want to be me again. So they helped me. They helped me do that. I was in there. I was talking to a therapist a couple times a week. I was taking all the supplements. It took me 1 whole year, but I could start thinking again, I literally started with children's find a word puzzles, like a book.
Just to get,
that just
like,
said, like teddy bear, find that, like, so to get my brain working again, to connect those neurons. I was like, okay, well, here we go, Snicker bar, find that. And I started doing that just like an old man. And I ended up doing children's crosswords, adult crosswords, and I was doing Sudoku and doing all these different
things. So progressively,
and like
got a little more challenging and stuff, and
progressively challenging myself, and it worked. I was like, I can go back to work again.
It almost feels like when someone becomes like paralyzed or needs physical therapy and they like have to relearn to walk again. You were like kind of retraining your mind again. I
retrained everything to get going again, and I got a job and have done pretty good. Like, it's just, I've never stopped though, because I can't stop, because if I stop with my therapy or my medicine or anything like that, like, it's been permanently altered. And I think that if I was to ever give up on my mental health, then I mean, I don't know if anything would happen, but it's just one of those things that I just try to reach out constantly to people, because it is something that can be fixed. It is something that can be fixed.
It might not be easy, and it might not be fast.
It might be a big challenge, honestly. For some people, it might be very easy. It depends on life and people and the situation and what's not working, but there's always room for you to improve it. And so I've made an honest point to be super straightforward with everybody else, because yes, my situation is a little bit different. I didn't do things in a quick, direct way. I wasn't suicidal in the way that it's just like, my depression is making me that way. But that's the same thing that people do. Like, the same thing that people do when they kill themselves in a more direct way, is they just think that they're solving a problem. Like, they're solving an issue with what sounds logical at the time. When there is other options out there if you let people talk to you.
Real quick, I have a personal story too about suicide, or at least suicidal thoughts. But up until the point that you were at Kermanos and met with someone and started going down the mental health path, what was your perception of mental health? What was your thought? Because we talked earlier about like the stigmas that people have.
Oh, I was so scared to do it because, well, I mean, I don't know. I just didn't think that anything would help me. Like, this is, I'm so smart. And most people, like, to be honest, I looking back on it, I had these issues as a child. Like, I know that now. Like, I can see it super easy, after the understandings that I've gained over the years of when I was cycling through these different things. But I've also come to understand that it's just a medical issue, which is just like anything. Like, it's like a cold or a flu or
the proper treatment.
Yeah, the proper treatment should be accepted just like that. But at the time, I was just like, at first I was really, really hesitant, because I'm like, well, what difference is that going to make? It's not going to solve the problem. I've got a solution here. Like, this is all cool. Like, I'm smarter than you. What's the point?
I think that's one of those things too that you just brought up, that I'm smarter than you. I think that's another barrier that people kind of prop up. Like, I already know what they're going to ask. I'm smarter. Like, I've dealt with people that's what they thought. Like, hey, you should probably talk to someone. Why? They're not going to tell me anything I don't already know. I'm smarter than them. I already know this stuff. Who knows me better than me? And I think that's an important, like, again, those are those excuses that people give themselves to not. And it's interesting that you were saying that, like, it's viewed as a solution, right? So, like, ending your life or suicide or just giving up, right, was viewed as, here's the set of problems I have, here's a solution. And it's funny because I never thought about it, like, specifically from that direction. And in my own personal experience, so when I was young, my parents have been divorced. My biological parents have been divorced since I was like 1, right? And then my dad remarried when I was 2 or 3. And my stepmom was in my life, most of my life. And I refer to her as mom, right? She's one of my mothers. We joke all the time, me and my wife, about how many mothers I have. And then my birth mother had remarried. And the guy that she had married was abusive. And I have vivid memories of my stepdad, like, picking her up by the throat and just wailing on her in front of me. And at one point, and this is probably around 5-6 years old, right around like kindergarten-ish age, being suicidal, sneaking steak knives into my room, wanting to kill myself, to the point that my parents put me into therapy and stuff like that. And that was it. It was, I'm the root cause of all these problems. If I wasn't around, my mom would be able to live her life, and it was, everything was on me. I felt that I was the one to blame. I feel like
people think it's a selfish issue when really it's a selfless issue.
And right, and it's from the, it's not like, oh, like, I never thought that when times were hard that, oh, my life sucks so bad because everything's against me, then I'm going to. All of my thoughts ever came from, right, at that time were, I'm the problem. If I wasn't around, these people wouldn't be burdened by this. They wouldn't be burdened by me. I wouldn't be causing these issues. And I think with obviously a lot more teen suicide and stuff, or at least it's more prevalent because we pay attention more and we hear about it more. News travels faster. That's a thing to keep in mind, right? Like when you're going through those divorces and things like that, like a lot of times we get so involved as the parents in our things, and we're not paying attention to what our kids are going through and how it's affecting them. And that was a conversation. Like I always tried to make a point with my son, because I mean I relived my life with him. You know, him and his mother and I stayed together longer than my parents did, but he was like 3 years old when we got divorced, and she was not a big part of his life. And that was, I mean, I saw my mom every other weekend. There was a period where I felt like she wasn't choosing me to spend time with me solely when I went over there. Like I felt that I was giving up too much time to my stepbrother and stepsister with my mom, and she was paying more attention to them and her new family with him, to where I didn't see her for like a year. And Dylan went through a lot of the same stuff. My son went through a lot of that same stuff, even worse than I did. And I feel like that depresses me, because I feel like, you know, no parent wants their kid to have as bad a life, right? They want better for their kids than they had. And I feel like there's a part of me that feels kind of guilty that like I didn't do that for him. He actually had worse than what I had in some respects. But yeah, that it wasn't a solution to end my suffering. It was to end other people's suffering when I had that as a young kid.
Reasoning. And it's just one of those things. I'm not saying it's that way in every case, but often.
And you brought up another thing too. You said that, you know, your therapist and medication. So you do feel that the medication has helped? Because I mean, I
think, especially depression, psychosis, like different things like that, like not just in different cases. I think it's been proven, and the science is there, that these are chemical imbalances, and adding the chemicals to balance it back out is just the responsible thing to do, and it needs to be accepted by people. People are very scared, especially creatives. And I will say that this is something that very much worried me, and I get the exact same feedback from people constantly. So, you know, musicians and artists and, you know, scientists throughout the years, you'll notice that numerous diagnoses and obvious
they always say, right?
Issues like
the greatest artists are the most fucked up, basically.
Yes, like that's why you end up with suicide and issues like that. And one of the things that people worry about, why they leave it untreated, is they go, if I take that, I won't be me. It's the most common excuse I've heard. Like, if I take that, it's not going to be me. It'll take away my artistic sense. It'll take away my thoughts, and I'll just be a zombie. No. Like, if you take it, on the other hand, you will be you, because you're not you right now. You're missing part of the chemical balances in your head. If anything, it'll make you more powerful. If anything, it'll make you more creative. If anything, it'll make you more of a genius, because these are the things that trouble you and worry you and put you in the... It will regain your focus and make you 100 times better. And to get people to understand that is probably one of the more difficult things. You know, like I had that exact same issue where I was scared that if I took something that I wouldn't be me.
And I think and maybe the thought behind that is because when these things happen, right, when you slide into these depressions and stuff, it isn't often an all-at-once thing. It's a progression. It's a gradual thing, and it's kind of like it
becomes the normal, your normal state, because most people, I can't remember the exact time, somewhere between 4 and 10 years that people are usually depressed before they seek help. That is a huge segment of one's life.
That's a huge piece of your life. It's almost like the to make an analogy of if you put a person in a pot of water and you gradually boiled it, You put them in cold water, the frog, right?
Yeah.
It won't know that it's actually being cooked alive, kind of thing, right? You just get used to it and you think everything's normal when realistically you've been undergoing this change for a while and it's been impacting every part of your life, but it's been so gradual and almost insidious that you don't see it. So then it's like, well, this is me, and if I do go down that route, like you said, now that's changing me, and I won't be the same me. And that is a debate that we had, like with my son and his ADHD and things like that, and then with the depression was we wanted to do everything before medication because we didn't want to have any kind of adverse reactions. And again, because there isn't one blanket medication, right? And sometimes it takes.
Oftentimes it fails. You have to try.
There's a lot of trial and error with it. There's a lot of trial and error with it.
Which is hard to accept because you might not get the solution that you want right off the bat.
And then sometimes it turns into a cocktail of, well, this one thing treats part of it, and then this other thing's going to treat the other part, and it can be scary to navigate that, and especially if you feel like already you're kind of going it alone, or you're in that position where you're super vulnerable like that, you're already low, and then it's like, I'm gonna try these things, and it's gonna change me. Yeah, I mean that's really rough, but it's really good to hear that in your experience, right? That was that helped you get to the light at the end of the tunnel, that helped you see through that part and change that mentality. And it started off with just someone talking to you.
Yeah, it started off with just somebody actually discussing and giving honest, non-judgmental feedback about stuff. Like, okay, if that's your decision, that's fine, but there's options. And I thank her a lot for that, that was 12 some years ago, a little more than that, and has things always gone perfectly? No, not necessarily. Doesn't always go perfectly. I've had to change different things here and there, but I think eliminating the stigma for myself has helped me survive and thrive, because in really difficult parts, like, to be 100% honest, my cancer came back during the pandemic. 2020, I ended up with it again. Not a good time. Actually incredibly frustrating because no one could visit me. No one could talk to me. Nobody could do it because everything's in lockdown. The doctors only allowed one visitor per day. And if that person left, they couldn't come back. So my poor wife, my new wife now, we're going...
Now we're the
new wife.
The new wife, right.
She is absolutely awesome. And
I would hope so.
More supportive than I could ever ask for. And I will say I had I was really happy to address things proactively. So guess what? When they told me, like, we need you to come in for your results, you know what I did this time?
You brought your wife.
I brought somebody. And then...
you're not going to get me again.
Yeah, that's not fucking happening, buddy. And so, like all
where's that spot on the customer feedback survey?
The stuff that I learned from, I try to take with instead of trying to play the victim game in my head. And, like, not insulting anybody's victimhood because that's important. But I'm just saying to myself, I didn't want to play a victim in my head. So, I was able to really do some amazing things to help me through. This time the surgery was even more intense. I have a colostomy now. I'm totally open with that. It's difficult. Did it help my self-esteem?
Yeah, and before you told me today, like, I had no idea. You didn't tell me that before, and that's a wild thing, and that's got to be a huge adjustment.
Huge adjustment for my life. It's not been awesome at times, but it's great that I continue to live on. But one of the first things I did after I got diagnosed is I gathered all my health professionals, like, well,
in 2020, you're
in
saying?
2020, and I was just like, this is what's going on. I need to increase my therapy. I need to make sure that my doctors understand that this is going to happen, because I'm not falling in that hole again. I'm going to be as proactive as humanly possible. I doubled up on all my appointments and made sure that things went well. And I didn't fall in that hole again. I faced some serious battles, and yes, I mean, it was super stressful, but I did panic. There was all kinds of stuff that I addressed, and because I didn't feel like I had a stigma anymore, and I felt like I could fight those things. And I mean, geez, just with my wife, I had, the trauma of when this happened last time. I lost my wife.
Right. You lost your whole everything at that point.
What is my mind thinking?
Right. Like, is this going to happen again?
This is going to happen again. Like, and I put a lot of stress on her. Like, I made things not cool for her because I was constantly panicked that something was going to happen. I was open about the whole thing, but it's just like...
And you said, too, like,
it makes your life so much better.
You said some of your humor is a little dark, too.
Yeah, I'm pretty dark about my humor. I just don't...
And, like...
It's all right. Like, I'm totally cool with it.
It's wild because...
Sometimes people are just like, hey, you're a little too honest.
I joke sometimes, too, that cancer's how I'm going to go. My whole mom's side of the family, except for my aunt, have all had some kind of lower body cancer, whether it's testicular, ovarian, uterine, colon. Like, they've all had some form of lower body cancer. So, I mean, I do make that dark joke, too, that I'm probably going to get, cancer. The reason I've had 2 colonoscopies already, for that reason, it was, hey, your family has enough of a history that you should probably start looking for this before the normal age of you need to start looking for this. So.
Yeah. I don't know. I just think that's the reason. Like, to be able to live your life, and certainly not perfectly. Like, nothing's ever perfect.
And while it's an adjustment,
like,
right?
You're going to get kicked in the butt every now and then. But if you actually lean on people, if you actually are honest without your feeling, if you actually talk to somebody about it, if you do these other things, it is solvable. And that's why I'm constantly fighting those stigmas. I'm constantly fighting the worry that people have, because, that's what I mean. Is there's so many people that would not have done what I did, and it gets to a dark place. It gets to a dark place fast, because if you're listening and you feel depressed, like, if you're ideating on things, which is just like thinking about it, then you should be in therapy.
You should be talking to someone.
You should be talking to somebody. If you have a plan, you should be going to a hospital right now.
Yeah, that was the deciding factor.
Like, that's the thing. Like, if you have an actual plan, then things are...
You're beyond thinking.
You're beyond... You need more aggressive help, and you need somebody to keep an eye on you. If you're just thinking about it, then that's a great sign that you probably just have some depression that can be handled quite easily. Not that the other thing can't be handled, but you need to be honest with people.
Do you think that the idea of like the time period that you grew up and where I grew up with, be a man, suck it up, men don't cry, like the toxic masculinity?
I think that's why you know so many people that once you get to know them, they've lost family members, grandfathers, fathers. Very often it's men.
And
because they're not allowed to ever talk about it.
And that's the part of that stigma, right? Is like, I
think it's 100%.
More so as a man in society.
I'm not saying that women don't count on this.
No,
women
not at all.
Often just far more apt to be open with their feelings,
right,
which is a gift. Like, that's amazing. Good for you. But
I think that's another part, right? That's another obstacle to overcome.
For men, it's an obstacle because if you're told, like, you don't ever do that. My dad never really hugged me or told me he loved me till I was dying.
Yo, wild thing.
And
same thing.
I'm not bad.
Except for I wasn't dying, but same thing.
That's how he was raised.
Growing up, I cannot remember a time where my dad hugged me consistently or told me that he loved me until the last 10 years. Like, even my wife has noticed. She's like, from when I met you to now, he tells me he loves me every time on the phone. He hugs me. He hugs her.
Yep.
He's totally shifted. And I always made a point of, because I remembered that in the time that I spent with my dad, he was working a lot. So I didn't have a lot of quality me and dad time all the time. And I made an effort to do that with my son. I told him I loved him all the time. I hugged him all the time. Anything that kid was interested in, I got it too. He liked Bakugan, I got my own set. He liked Beyblades, I got my own set. Like, he wanted to do this, I did it. He wanted to race RC cars, I've got an RC car right in there. Like, everything he wanted to do, I always made a point to do with him too, so that he knew that I supported what he wanted to do most of the times. And that he, you know, he had someone to do it with. If he didn't have friends that wanted to play it, well, Dad will play it with me. And it has been wild to see that change in my own dad, where I can't remember at all. And then all of a sudden, in the last 10 years,
sort of going away.
It's changed, and I think it needs to, because clearly, like, nothing good, right, happens from bottling that stuff up and just holding it inside and trying to man through it, when one, it could be some kind of crazy abscess growing inside your abdomen that's going to kill you, or it could be just dealing with those mental health issues, the thoughts of depression, the depression, or the thoughts of suicide, things like that. And just knowing that, like, a simple conversation could be the difference between life and death, and to not have that conversation for some outdated male ideology is kind of crazy to think that, like, that's what's holding people back sometimes from having that life-saving talk.
I'm happy that it's changing.
Me too.
And I hope that it's changing positively. You know, sometimes I think it occasionally goes in the wrong direction when people are just like, oh, you know, they get victim-y and things like that, and they make a lot of a little, but I also don't want to say that people are making a lot from a little, because everybody thinks of different ways.
Right. Everybody, everybody
thinks different ways. But I don't think that the way that our grandfathers and fathers did it is perfect in any way. Like, it's perfectly okay to, you know, you get in your little things and you get in your zones, and it's cool. Like, every now and then, that commercial comes on for Kodak or something like that, and if you cry your ass off, it's okay.
Yeah,
like, that's cool. The commercial hit me too, man. That's all right.
It's funny, right? On this message board that I'm on for hunting, right? They had a no shame thread, so it's all about saddle hunting, which is like a huge popular thing in the hunting world right now, is hunting out of a tree saddle, and there's the no shame thread, like, you know, what no shame here, no judging. What are you kind of ashamed of? And then someone started the no shame, it's okay to cry, like, conversation. And the very first one, someone opened up with, like, this music video that shows, like, this little girl, and she gets a puppy, and then, like, through all her trials and tribulations, this dog's with her, but now the dog's dying, and she's got to be there at the dog's end of its life and stuff. And it just turned into all these grown men, hunters and other stuff, you know, like, just talking about all the things that have just made them bawl their asses off throughout their lives. And
there's just certain things, like,
there's nothing wrong with it.
It actually feels good, man. I think it feels good
to let it out. I
think sometimes it feels really great.
It's a natural emotion, and to repress it is unnatural. Like, I don't know. It's weird, and sometimes there was this, you know, I had a lot of stuff going on with my son and how everything was going, and him leaving. And we were driving down the road, me and my daughter and my wife, we were driving, and whatever the song was that was on just hit me the right way, and I just fucking lost it while I was driving. Just started fucking bawling, and my wife's like, "Are you okay?" And my daughter's like, "Dad, are you all right?" And I'm like, "I don't know why I'm fucking crying right now, but I'm just crying." And I just like my body in from everything that I've been dealing with just had to get it out, and it just chose right then and there while I was fucking driving. I'm a sniveling, sobbing mess. I'm halfway laughing because I'm like, I don't know why I'm doing this.
I've had that happen many times. There's certain music that I was really into during the worst times of my life that
always elicit that emotion
that I can't even listen to because I love it, but if I listen to it, it's just too emotionally overwhelming, and it transports me. It's trauma inducing.
Yeah,
there was some stuff, and I will say, like I downloaded like Apple Music not too long ago, and I am gonna sound like the oldest of old men right now, but I'm kind of new to the streaming music world.
Okay.
Like I'm just like giving
it anti-streaming, sort of.
I'm giving it a shot, and because my wife has a membership, and she was just like, hey, like you have a membership if you just log in, and because it's for the family,
right?
It's like, okay, like I'll do this. I was listening to. I feel it. I don't know how to really change the station on it. Like I don't.
So you just listen to whatever plays.
So whatever plays, I just listen to.
Just go with it.
And I love rockabilly, and my favorite band, and I have a couple real favorite bands, but up in the top 3 is Social Distortion.
Okay.
So I was listening to Social Distortion, which I just love. Makes me feel great every single time I listen to it. And somehow it transported over the months into just outlaw country. So like now every time I get into the car, it just automatically Bluetooths up and I listen to outlaw country. So I'm on the way here. And I'm listening.
Oh, this is today. Okay.
This is literally hours ago. So I'm on the way here and I'm just listening to outlaw country, like do 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 do. And kind of in relation, like I'm on my way here, there is this song, and I've got to go back
and find out what the fuck that song was.
And find out what was going on, because it was so fucking amazing. Like, it was called Finger on the Trigger. And it was about a man sitting there with a gun in his hand waiting to kill himself.
Dark.
And it's incredibly dark, but I was just like, wow, I can't believe that they created this and they're playing it on the radio. And I felt like that was a great opening to discussion, though. Something Beaufort or Beauregard or something, but the fellow was the guy's name. And I just listened to it and I turned it
Blue
up.
Edmondson?
Yes. I think so. I was just like, I can't believe this song was put on the radio, but I was impressed. I was impressed that it broke that barrier.
I can't play too much of it because then they'll be like, oh, there's copyright shit in your stuff.
Blue Edmondson, Finger on the Trigger, if you have a chance, like, listen to it. But I was impressed because it's about, I mean, it's very country because it's like, DPS is going to take away the kids and all these other things. But, I mean, it was like nothing was going right in this guy's head. And it just was very interesting that they're embracing that. And I was like, this guy's really touching on some territory that is interesting. So, I mean, it kind of goes to our talk today, but I was just like, I'm very impressed that he's making this discussion and putting it out there, and then that they're playing it on the radio. It's starting to lose my voice. I'm sorry.
It's all right. It's we've been at it for quite a while. It's probably time to get towards wrapping it up.
Yep, we got to get to the wrap up.
But
edit out some of our nonsense. It
will definitely get.
It will get much shorter. Once we eliminate all of our.
I think my wife's waiting to make dinner.
Our rambling on politics, but it's fun.
The overall arching thing, though, right, is don't be afraid to reach out those stigmas are slowly breaking down, but it does feel like we are making progress as far as towards mental health. It feels like we definitely have a long ways to go, but we're starting to make progress.
I think we have a shorter way to go in acceptance between people and loved ones. Like, I think if your friend or family member comes open, it's not there. Where we have a huge step to go, and please always think about this when you're talking to politicians or whoever it may be when you're voting, like what our government supports and what healthcare supports, and those need to be changed. Like, we need to open up to more acceptance and funding for mental health care, because I think that'll help our country immensely. I'm throwing a view out there, but it just 100%.
I totally agree. There's too many.
There's too much that's ignored because people are scared they don't have the money to either address it, or the insurance to address it, or their insurance won't address it, or it needs to be the same as getting a physical,
or even just the social stigmas. Like, we're starting to break those down, but it's important that we keep that, because
and hire people. Like, the other thing is yes, for the stigma, if somebody discusses things and breaks that wall and provides the information that they have overcome something, congratulate them and do not hold them back.
Yeah.
Don't prejudge them. Don't do things like that. Don't take away their rights. Have them be the same as how much you would embrace somebody for overcoming cancer or overcoming COVID or overcoming,
because they can, right? They can be huge life-altering events.
Yeah, like there is no difference. There is no difference.
And I think another good point too would be, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about, but don't define someone by a period in their life or the mental health episode or mental health disease, whatever it is that someone's experiencing shouldn't be a defining characteristic in how you view and look at those person. And like we were talking about, affect their life later on, be held to, hey, this is what happened to you back when you were a kid, or vice versa. It's a good topic. Justin, thank you so much for sharing your story. 'Cause dude, that's a lot to take in. And I'm glad that you found your way through that and you're here today, because I appreciate your friendship, and I'm glad to have you here. You're always welcome on the show.
Everybody gets their ass kicked. Just remember to give your friends and family a hug when they need it.
Yeah, go give your friends and family a hug for sure. Tell them you love them.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's us for the Get Up. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to The Get Up. Make sure to check out thegetupshow.com for more information on this episode's guests. While you're there, check out other episodes, leave a comment, or if you'd like to be a guest on a future episode, shoot an email to contact@thegetupshow.com. Don't forget to follow, like, and share on Facebook at The Get Up Show Podcast. Follow on Instagram and Twitter at The Get Up Show, and subscribe to The Get Up YouTube channel. The Get Up is available on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, Google Play Music, YouTube, and anywhere you listen to your favorite podcasts.